Yes, it was funny actually how we just thought we'd kind of dominate weight loss, which we kind of did, but then we just pivoted into something else.
Yeah.
We didn't really set out to make protein bars.
Yeah.
Because protein bars didn't sell, but
Why didn't the protein bars sell?
because nobody made a good one.
Yeah.
So we didn't invent protein bars, but we invented good ones.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key a lot of the time for business. I see so many products and brands and services that people send to me, and people they solve problems that don't exist.
Yeah.
So they'll create something you think, well, I get it, but that wasn't the problem that needed solving, to be honest.
I think there's three things, because I write as well a lot about challenger brands and stuff.
Anything you don't do?
Yeah, quite a few. I don't fly fucking choppers, mate.
Not many of us do that. Yeah. Not very well anyway.
But one of the things I was thinking about is like there's three that you can either go with trends, which in terms of a brand, which is like, you know, with sort of kombucha or prebiotic stuff.
I don't like that either as well.
But that's a nightmare.
Yeah.
The third way is to create a category from scratch, which is basically solving problems people don't need. Or creating problems that don't exist. Solving problems that don't exist.
That's the one.
There we go. Third time lucky. Yeah. Or just pick a category that is not done well.
That's what I was going to say.
And just do that, because that's what you guys have done. Have you seen the Bold? I talk about a lot, the brand Bold Bean Co.
No.
She's a good friend of mine. She's absolutely, like, flying.
I'm guessing it's coffee.
No, it's fucking beans. You know, like beans, the shitty, like
baked beans.
Baked beans.
Right, okay.
But done in a really good way. They've just done a deal with all these, like, Nigella Lawson's in on it. Like, it's mad.
I think I have seen that somewhere. That's
like,
probably a good example where, yeah, I'm guessing baked beans aren't that sexy, and she didn't invent baked beans.
Yeah.
It's probably done a really good one.
Yeah.
But actually, no one knew they needed or wanted until all of a sudden it turned up with a better one. Yeah, that's probably a good point, actually.
Yeah. It's we're all rolling out.
We've started.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I think what I'd like to begin with is kind of that period where you did. We're going to jump all around, mate. So there's no kind of chronological order.
I'm good at that.
But take me so you've built the business. It's got to a massive size. I want to get really into the granular details of this Cadbury's and Mondelez deal. But take me to the sort of the 6 months before that. Like, what did the business look like? What were you looking like? And not looking like, but like, how was your role, you know, in the business? And then what were some of the sort of unforeseen challenges to get that deal over the line? Because, as I was saying before we hit record, Giles said to me, he goes, mate, 96%, he says, about 96% of these deals, these big exit deals, or, you know,
don't happen.
They don't happen, and it's like everything fucking hangs by a thread. So talk me through that period.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in there. I think starting in reverse order, the reason a lot of these deals don't happen is a lot of these businesses and brands are built on smoke and mirrors. And I think that's the problem potentially nowadays with the world we live in with social media, where things aren't always what they seem.
Yeah.
So, and there are so few people who've built a big business from scratch that's a quality business and they've had a successful exit. I'd be struggling to probably get beyond 10, certainly in the UK.
What are some of the smoke and mirrors that people are hiding behind or creating? I
so when someone comes along and looks to invest in your business, you know, to the tune of, well, you know, in our case, millions and millions of pounds, or certainly buy the business completely, you know, they do something called due diligence.
Yeah.
And you know, it's one thing having a survey done on your house, but imagine having due diligence done on your business, because it takes months and months and months, and it's actually incredibly invasive. And for instance, we didn't actually know this happened until afterwards. But you know, our first investment that we had, the investors, you know, they got us credit checked, and you know, again, I'd never had any bad credit, but we actually felt it was probably quite invasive. You know, it's quite personal. They want to dig into all of your staff, people you've hired. More importantly, they want to go and talk to people that you fired or have left.
Why?
So, but it's like them going around talking to like ex-girlfriends and things. You know, because generally, now again, to be fair, this is actually, again, one of the nice things about Grenade. You know, of course, we've hired lots of people over the years. Many of the times, you know, it doesn't always work out. Sometimes it's our fault, sometimes it's their fault, sometimes it's no one's fault. But I think, you know, whenever you end those the employment relationships well, which I think, you know, we'd always done, And, we've had people steal from us over the years and all sorts, but generally speaking, if you went to speak to someone who used to work for you, what are the chances of them saying nice things about you? So the DD process is just unbelievably invasive. I know people look at all this stuff on Dragon's Den and whatever, and that's why, again, most of these deals on Dragon's Den don't happen, because people lie about numbers.
But why would they be wanting to know, what past employees are saying? Because as you say, most people who've left the business are wanting. It's not exactly glorious. But what are they trying to find out?
So they're looking for a reason to probably not pay the asking price for the business.
Yeah.
And they're looking to find out what they're getting into, and they might know what Al Barrett's like on social media. They might know what Al Barrett's like in the 3 meetings they've had with him. But they want to know what you like to work for. And are you a good boss? Are you a bad boss? Do people think you're a shit? Do they like you? Do they trust you? Do they respect you? Will they work hard for you? There's people don't just put millions of pounds into these businesses and just gamble. And again, that's why, remember as well, most businesses fail. So, for them to be pretty sure that this is going to be a worthwhile investment for them, they need to know the answers to a lot of questions. They were talking to suppliers, customers. We got suppliers and customers all over the world. We still do have. And, we were flying around the world going to capsule facilities, and they were talking to people that make components for us. And it just goes on and on and on. And I think after sort of several months of due diligence, you just think, the questions have to stop soon. But very often, the answer to one question leads to 3 more questions, and you do get sort of pretty sick of it. I mean, certainly going back to the first deal we did in 2013, with GrowthPoint. And again, GrowthPoint, our first investor, fantastic, absolute love for those guys, really lovely people, thoroughly enjoyed working with them. Great for them, it was great for us. They got a fantastic exit out of it, as everyone has out of Grenade. But it was our first. It was the first time we'd ever actually raised investment, so this was very much a learning curve for me in terms of the DD that they were doing. And the questions were just endless. And remember, at the time, you're trying to run a business, and the business was growing really quickly, and I'm not looking for things to do. Answering 30, 40, 50 questions a day, you get a bit tired of it when you've got other things to do, because, it's easy then for the business to start slipping. And then, they probably won't mind me saying this. Can I swear?
Oh, yeah.
So they probably won't mind me saying this, but they'll say, the business wasn't as good. The numbers weren't as good last month. I'm like, yeah, because if you guys would fuck off and let us run the business, it'd be better. But, either buy it or just fuck off. I don't care one way or another. Yeah. And it was...
so this Mondelez asking you these questions?
No, this was... that Mondelez was a whole different kettle of fish. I'm just talking about the first investment we did with GrowthPoint in 2013. So,
right, okay.
Again, we got through it. But they were asking why, for instance, I'll give you a specific example.
Sorry, I'm going to ask some dumb questions here for
no problem.
For 3-year-old sort of questions.
No such thing as a dumb question.
Yeah. So basically, when you go to GrowthPoint, how big's the business in terms of revenue?
I'm guessing we were probably doing about 6, 7, 8 million maybe at the time.
Right. So then GrowthPoint come in and they give you X amount of cash. So
they came in and bought a significant shareholding in the business. And to be fair, we didn't really need the money at the time. We needed the help and the expertise, and we needed professionalising, because I think we had 6 staff.
Right.
So we were very, very understaffed at the time. Jules and I had never taken a salary. We'd never taken a day off. We were just grafting. We didn't realise, actually, genuinely, we'd built something that was probably potentially quite so valuable. We were just having fun doing our thing in the industry and doing things our way. But one of the questions that they'd asked was, this particular, we had a customer in France at the time, and he hadn't ordered in the previous few months because his son had been really ill. And the distributor had obviously got better things to do, because he had a critically ill son. And they said, this guy's not ordered. And I said, his son's really ill. And then the next month, the question came up. And I think I get frustrated when I'm answering questions and people aren't listening to the answers. And it turns out this chap's son actually passed away. And they asked the question again, why isn't this guy ordered from you? And I'm like, his son's dead. There's no other way I can answer this question, but dead people don't buy product from us.
Yeah.
And I thought, I can't answer this any other way. It sounds hideous, doesn't it? But I'm so sick of just these endless questions when you're busy, you're tired. It's unbelievably stressful. And again, we're only covering one part of your initial question, which I've forgotten the rest of it now.
Don't worry. Yeah, as I said, we'll get there.
But DD is brutal.
What other sort of questions do they ask you? Or like if anyone's going to be going through an exit, what sort of stuff should they be thinking about now?
Anything you can think of, product recalls, sales, customers, territories, like I said, staff. If you can think of anything to do with a business, your forecast for the next 3, 4, 5 years, is your history of forecasting good? Because if your previous history of forecasting is bad and you've been inaccurate in the past, they won't believe your future forecasts either, because a lot of these businesses as well are valued on future earnings. So they've got to be pretty confident that they know what your future earnings are going to be. Now, again, with Grenade, we always underpromise and overdeliver. So our earnings were always exceeded what we said we'd do. That's really rare. I've never met a business since that does that. Everyone overpromises and underdelivers, which again is quite frustrating. So, just to quickly run you through the history of investment with Grenade, we had a £35 million valuation with Growthpoint in, I think it was actually early 2014. That went through. They exited with a valuation of 72 million in 2017 to Lion Capital. So Lion were our second set of investors, and Lion were experts in brand, basically, which Growthpoint weren't. By their own admission. And then some of the Lion investments were Weetabix, GHD, Jimmy Choo, Kettle, the potato chip brand, All Saints. So just again, well-known high street brands. And then, they came in 2017, and then they exited in March 2021, which was to Mondelez, and that was the £200 million investment. And then we did a 3-year earn out then, and then as of last year, Grenade was valued at, just as of May last year, 611 million pounds sterling. So, and the business actually paid out, the shares were paid out at that value. Which I think was 27 times EBITDA, which is pretty unheard of. So I don't think people really realise, because we make really serious products at Grenade, but we don't take ourselves seriously, and I don't take myself seriously.
Yeah.
But I genuinely don't think most people believe or understand what a quality business Grenade was and still is. Yeah. Just to give you some context again, Mondelez, who bought Grenade in 21, they've made 2 investments in the UK, Grenade and Cadbury. Mondelez is a spin-off of Kraft. So it's the snacking arm of Kraft. Mondelez have a market cap of 300 billion, and it's a spin-off of another, bigger business. So gives you an idea of the size and scale of the investment. And as we said, most of these investments don't happen. It's bullshit. Or they'll sell a very small amount. They'll sell, 1 or 20% of the shares at some bonkers valuation. And then for the next 2 decades, people are desperately trying to fight to get their money back and to exit the investment. Everyone that come into Grenade has paid good money, but they've had an incredible investment and they've exited. So I like simplicity, kind of 1 in, 1 out. And there's just so few brands do that. Brands get stuck with investments that go on for years. I suspect now that Mondelez is the forever home for Grenade, because, it does extremely well. There's a lot to do with the synergies, versus the likes of Cadbury. And we've got tons of IP synergy that we can share with Cadbury. And again, the other brands that they own, because, Mondelez own Lou and Philadelphia, Belvita, Cadbury, obviously, we've mentioned. There's quite a few brands, in the US. I mean, they own Oreo. Oreo itself is a $5 billion brand. It's the world's largest cookie brand. Yeah. So, it's an incredible stable to be part of. And Mondelez have just been the best partners we could ever have. Now I was employee number 1 at Grenade. There's 90,000 staff, I believe, at Barnes.
Really?
It's a lot of people there. So again, there comes a lot of corporate stuff, but they're doing a really good job trying to keep us separate from the corporate stuff, because
we'll get to
there's good and bad that comes with that.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to get to the Cadbury's Mondelez, because I think that's interesting. But going sort of back to maybe Growthpoint, that time stamp, because I think is that, as you said, like there's so much that people don't think about, right? If you were to go back to that period again, right, and this will help a lot of people listening to this, and there are like one or two things you'd really be focusing on in your business now, because as you said, you've got 27 times EBITDA, which is kind of unheard of.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think most people should be thinking about that they just kind of, they may neglect, or is kind of underrated, or?
I mean, there's so many ways I can answer this. I mean, first of all, building a quality business, quality team. You've got to have a world-class product, brand, or service. You've got to be making money. The vast majority of businesses I see, they're losing money, and yet
when you say making money, is that like profit?
Well, you've got to be making EBITDA. You've got to be making net profit at the end of the year, because that's a good way to value a business.
Yeah.
A lot of businesses that get bandied around as well, with bonkers valuations, they've burnt through so much money, which generally isn't their own. They're just looking for more money to burn through. And you think, well, I won't name any specific businesses, but let's use a silly example. So let's say, you're a potato farmer and you've got a potato field and you've got one field that grows potatoes. And, every year that field, you lose £1 million on the potato field. But then what they want to do is they want to have 10 more potato fields. But then if you're not careful, but they want to keep doing everything they're currently doing. So you turn the 1 million loss into a 10 million loss. And a lot of these businesses, they're just amplifying the loss. There's something inherently in the business that might be broken. Sometimes businesses they just pay themselves too much. We didn't take a salary for 4 years. So any money they make, they just pay themselves. They're off buying Range Rovers and going around the world and having holidays, and generally can be overstaffed. I mean, there's 140 staff there at Grenade now. We started with 2. We were doing, the first couple of years, we'd make 54% EBITDA. Because we kept on reinvesting the money in the business and didn't pay ourselves a salary and ran extremely lean and mean. And I think that's what I'm saying. A lot of these businesses now, they just don't run lean and mean. They don't want to, or they can't. I don't know anyone who doesn't pay themselves a salary really out their business, because they'll say, oh, but I've got kids and want to have a holiday and we've got a mortgage and we've got this. Yeah, I get all that. But then we made a lot of sacrifices. Jules, my ex-wife, and I, Jules is co-founder of Grenade, we decided that we wouldn't have children because Grenade was our baby. Yeah. And we didn't want the distraction or the cost of having kids. That was a sacrifice that we made. No, I don't actually. Yeah. No, I don't. I'm 48 now. I don't as of yet. It just never really happened for us. We weren't anti-kids. We were just doing something else. Yeah. But as I sit here, no, I don't regret having kids. And Jules and I are fantastic friends. We've got 3 of the businesses together. I speak to her most days. And no, I don't. Maybe if you ask me that question again in 10 or 20 years, I may regret not having kids in terms of legacy, but I still think, Grenade is very much my legacy. And I met with Julian Dunkerton a few weeks ago. He's the founder of Superdry. And he'd got 2 kids from a previous marriage. And then I met his 2 children from his current marriage to Jade. And, he's 16. He's got 2-year-old. And he said, oh, you need to have kids. It's the best thing I've ever done. And it was interesting, actually. I'm sure he's right. And I was thinking, maybe I should have kids. but honestly, I think I'm so busy doing other stuff. Yeah. As well, that you can't do it all, can you? In that respect, we should probably go back and try and answer some of the questions. The original question.
We're going to get there, and this just flows around, so don't worry.
Okay.
So I think the one thing you said about what people should be thinking about, and I think it's a really good point, is lean and mean, and actually. Are you making money? Are you making EBITDA? Is it a profitable business? That's the first thing.
I think there's got to be a path to profitability. I think my bizarre, potato farmer analogy, they just think they're going to amplify the loss. And if they're losing money with the business
when you say amplify the loss,
because a lot of the time they think that if they have more money going into the business, it's going to suddenly become profitable. And some of these businesses don't. You just end up, the more money that goes in, the more money that goes out.
You say more money going in, that's investment, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm always very, very wary. We always used our own money for Grenade. So it was our risk, it was our money, it was our loss if it lost money. Yeah. I think there are too many founders out there, potentially, who are just very happy to lose someone else's money. Yeah. And actually, someone said to me once, years and years ago, before I even founded Grenade, he said, never use your own money in a business, always use someone else's.
Oh, God.
And that didn't make any sense to me then, and it makes even less sense to me now. And I just can't disagree with that comment strongly enough. I'd be heartbroken. I wouldn't, people who say, don't they, treat other people how you'd expect to be treated yourself. And I just can't imagine pissing away someone else's money because I didn't want to piss away my own. So that's my...
Yeah, the path to profitability, like how do you figure that out? Like what are some of the why is the path so hard to see sometimes with so many brands, and how would you do it?
A lot of these businesses and brands probably have very skinny margins, and I think as you grow a business, some things get cheaper. You might have, depending what the business is, with volume, you might have certain savings and certain efficiencies and certain cost savings and so on. If you're in a premises, and it's £1,000 a week rent and there's 10 of you sat there, but then if there's 50 people sat there, you're still paying £1,000 a week rent. So, but then you are employing 40 more people. I think people underestimate as you start employing more people, all these costs start creeping in, and people have very convoluted.
What are some of those hidden costs?
Well, just employment, NI. I mean, look what happened in the last 12 months with Rachel Thieves and the genius plan to screw British businesses and hike NI. I know I've got personal friends that NI hike has cost them £1 million a month.
Yeah,
that is just pretty much money down the drain. Because I think as well, we won't go into this because we won't get political, but I've got no issue at all paying tax. All the extremely wealthy people I know don't mind paying tax. What they do mind is the fact that the government, whichever government it is, because the Tories will know better, but whichever government it is, they just piss it away. They waste it. And it comes back to that point of just wasting someone else's money. So I'm very much a believer of backing myself, using my money. And if it doesn't work out, I've only got myself to hold accountable. Yeah. And I don't have to go to an investor and say, really sorry, I lost all of your money. It just happens. And this is why so many investors have been burned. This is why they're very reluctant to put money into businesses with an enormous amount of DD and security, which I can completely understand. I'm now an investor in businesses, and there's very, very few that actually float my boat. And I've only got 6 criteria, to be fair, in terms of investing, which is pretty simple, but I don't see much.
What are those 6?
Yeah, I mean the 6. I actually added a 6th yesterday, so it used to be 5. But basically, it's got to be backable founders. Yeah. So you've got to have incredible founders that you like and you trust and you can work with. And most founders as well are fairly unemployable. I'd be one of those people, so that's actually quite a hard hurdle to overcome because you've got to work with these people. And I'm not the easiest person to work with. I know that. Doesn't mean I'm wrong, but I'm not easy to work with. So backable founders. And I'll give you an actual example in a minute of a business I've invested in where they tick all these boxes. It's got number 2. It's got to be a product, brand, or service that I would actually use and I'd pay for. Mm-hmm. Because if I wouldn't buy it, why would I invest in it? Because if I won't buy it, someone else probably wouldn't buy it either. Yeah. So again, I quite like simplicity, and if I like it, I think other people will like it. Something that doesn't need too much time. Because I've had investments in the past where they just want you running their business for them, and obviously haven't got time to do that. So they can't be too time consuming. It's got to be something as well that actually is really good fun. So you can tick a lot of these boxes, but let's say, I have a shower every day, as most people do. But if it was a business that was just making shower heads, and there were backable founders and it was something I'd buy, is it something I'm going to leap out of bed every day and get excited about? Probably not. If anyone wants to prove me wrong, you've got an amazing showerhead company, then carry on. I think that brings us to number 5. You've got to have a sensible valuation. And again, a lot of brand owners just think their business is worth millions or even billions. And again, it's just pouring away money. And I just can't see a path to profitability. Yeah. And everyone cites the likes of Uber. They go, but Uber's worth 47 trillion. That loses money. And go, yeah, but you're not Uber, are you? There's always exceptions to the rule of businesses that lose a lot of money and it's still very valuable. But, again, there's a lot of, there are very few Ubers, for instance. And then the 6th one, which I actually added yesterday, was you've got to have a path to exit, because otherwise I just end up being a shareholder in a business and you can't get the shares out. Yeah.
That's really, because this is something I've talked about with Giles and he's talking about the innocent example. So you almost know, like product market fit. He was like brand exit fit, right? Because he was talking about the story of he sold Bear snacks to Lotus. You know Lotus.
Yeah, I know Lotus well. Yeah.
And basically they'd got this fruit twister.
Lotus actually looked at us, but they were a little bit late to the party. I think
really?
a deal had sort of been done.
Right.
But Lotus did look at us, but we never actually had a conversation with them.
Yeah, well, basically he was saying, so they'd created this MPD. So, they'd gone into fucking all sorts of different stuff. Lotus were like, we don't care about any of that. We want your fruit rolls business. We're buying a multiple of that. All this other stuff, I don't care.
Get rid of.
Same thing with, Innocent. At one point, they came out with the, it was part of their whole thinking was one of 5 a day. And it was almost like a soup, almost like a broth. Again, when they exited Coca-Cola, like, well done, you've built a business. We don't want that. We want this. And I think path to exit is something which I love talking to guests about. And we're going to get onto that because I think it's something that especially as I now talk about sort of this exit and as more of sort of the conversation, the podcast, it is fascinating because it's not as easy. It's not just about building a fucking great business. It's like, how do you actually get it to exit? But let's just pull more on the thread of path to profitability, because I think that is such a nebulous fucking landscape for people to traverse. So the first thing you said is obviously just keeping it lean, not buying yourself a Range Rover and going to Barbados every year, keeping it, and also sort of being aware of these sort of hidden costs, NI going up. Is there anything else that can slap a challenger brand or just get in as an obstacle on the path to profitability?
I mean, again, even competition, let's say that someone pops up and they're making the same sort of product that you are, but it's better than yours.
Yeah.
And let's say it's half the price. You've potentially got a decision to make. Now, again, we never wanted to be the cheapest at anything. I think being the cheapest is a very, very dangerous game. We just want to be the best because, let's take discount retail. If Lidl were the cheapest, then Aldi comes along or whatever, then B&M, someone can always come in and undercut you. There'll always be someone prepared to make a loss or make less money than you, and it's just a really dangerous game to play in. So, the competitive landscape is something, again, potentially that can shaft a lot of businesses. But where you have to be careful is some of these businesses, again, we chatted about where you can have like a bit of a moment in time and, trend categories. Some of these trend categories do come and go. So you might have a really specific sweet spot to, build your business and exit before that category just crumbles away. I mean, I'm thinking just like potentially energy shots. Look at energy shots in the UK. You can probably still buy them. It won't be a big category. It wasn't even big here when it was big, not compared to the US. But I think Lucasade had a go and Red Bull had a go. And I don't remember ever buying an energy shot, but it was huge in the US. It's an example where there was a moment in time for that category and the big players had a go at it. And, and as far as I know, didn't make any impact.
How did you know protein bars wouldn't be a moment in time?
Because backing up, I've trained all my life. I've trained for I've trained since I was 14 years old, and I know the benefits of training, and I weight train, I do other stuff, but whether it's walking or running or hiking or swimming, a lot of people now like activity and realise the benefits of activity. And obviously, COVID taught us that health is wealth. So, do I think training is going to go anywhere? Whatever training we're talking about, no, because I think once you've trained, it's really hard not to train. So, okay, so if training is staying, training is quite closely linked to nutrition and, again, health for the same reasons. Food's expensive. People are quite disorganised. So, supplementation helps with, making it your diet easier to manage day to day. So nutrition, I think, is going to stay. Supplementation, therefore, I think will stay. And again, people like chocolate. So the chocolate category is still growing. And we didn't really set out to disrupt chocolate per se. When we first started out with Grenade, we were actually more interested in weight loss and sports nutrition. But we've made a good job, I think, of just capturing all the people who are falling away from chocolate. And in terms of people have realising the benefits now of protein, so more protein, less sugar. So I think if you kind of take a path through logic of training, nutrition and supplements, it feels like it should just get bigger and bigger and bigger. So, I mentioned a point about competitive landscape earlier and disruption. I'm a really big believer in disrupting ourselves. If we can make a better protein bar, we do, because if we don't, someone else will. So I do believe we should keep disrupting ourselves. And as long as consumers still, buy those bars and enjoy them, and if they find a protein bar a really convenient way to get 20 grams of protein, which they know is good for them, whether you're training or not, protein's good for you, to maintain muscle tissue and muscle health as you get older, certainly, then...
And they taste so fun.
Yeah, and they taste really good. Yeah, and they're almost indistinguishable. They're almost indistinguishable from chocolate bars. Again, you've got to put them in locations that people find convenient. And again, protein bars aren't cheap, but nothing's cheap. So when we first launched the bar, we'd got retailers comparing us to chocolate. They were saying, well, your protein bar's $2.50 and, a chocolate bar's 50p. I think, well, yeah, but we're high protein and low sugar, and they're high sugar and low protein. So protein's expensive and sugar's cheap. So
how did you convince? I know, because one thing I think you guys have done, and I think a lot of brands are now following suit, is do you know Surreal, the
yes, yeah, I've tried the cereal. Yeah,
I think there's because I think you guys were the first to sort of really own really own a premium price and get huge fucking distribution. Because there's one thing, and this is what I spoke to James Watt about, is like, how do you go premium, but premium pricing, but actually go mass market? Like, it's such a paradox. And you guys have done that. Brewdog have done that with Punk IPA.
Yeah, Brewdog's a great example.
But how did you guys do that in retail? Because I get it now, like we can sit here, and the brands, with Mondelez. But back in those early days, like, how do you convince a buyer or those early retailers to give you the right to be at that price point versus chocolate? Founders, cash is literally king. If you don't have cash in your business, you are going bust, mate. Imagine you've landed a banging retailer or you've got a brand new bit of NPD going live. Suppliers need paying today, but the cash won't hit your bank account for 3 months. It's a headache wrapped in a nightmare, and that's why I'm delighted to announce we are partnering with Mimo, short for money in, money out. Mimo automates your finances, streamlines workflows, and keeps your books up to date. But the real hero here, the absolute Don, is Mimo Flex, flexible working capital built into your finance workflow. With Mimo Flex, you can draw what you need when you need it and repay as receivables land. Use it to keep inventory moving, fund campaigns, or negotiate better supplier terms. You could apply for a revolving line of up to 1 million, and you only pay month to month on what you've actually used. It's insane. Credit subject to eligibility and status, fees and terms do apply. Listen, your favourite challenger brands literally love Mimo. Surreal, Hunter and Gatherer, Nice Wine, Better Nature Tempeh, and tons more. Learn more and apply at mimohq.com. If you're a challenger brand that's absolutely killing it in D2C, but you're struggling to crack retail, then you've got to listen to this. Maybe you've got an Ocado listing, maybe you've got a Whole Foods listing, maybe you're absolutely killing it in Selfridges, maybe you're absolutely killing it in your farm shop and your indies, but my friends, making the leap, crossing El Chasm, crossing El Rubicon to grocery retail is not easy. It's the Champions League of FMCG. It's super hard. It means playing at a higher level, and that's where so many amazing brands sadly stumble. Look, retailers want stories backed by data, not dreams, and a pretty pitch deck. And let's be real, supermarkets are not just going to magically make a space for you and your little brand. They need data. Something's got to go for you to get in, for you to get on shelf. And that is why I've got to tell you about North Star. They are the team that's helping purpose-led FMCG brands go from gut instinct dreams to unstoppable pitch decks that actually unlock retailers. North Star are not like another data company that force feeds you data like foie gras, that act like a NASA space mission. It's super, super simple to use. Their team are amazing and they actually get the challenger mindset. North Star are your shortcut to smarter decisions, stronger pitches, and investor confidence, all built specifically for challenger brands like yours. You don't need a massive sales team, you need North Star. Link in the show notes, click that link and you'll be able to book a free demo with North Star. Highly, highly recommend that, and thank me later.
Well, I think the mistake that the retailers made at the time was they were comparing us to chocolate.
Yeah.
But actually it was a false comparison. It wasn't like comparing Coke to Pepsi, and one being twice the price. As I just said, really, protein's expensive and sugar's cheap. So it wasn't the fact that we wanted people to necessarily buy us instead of a chocolate bar, although it was one of the reasons. But also, you think, well, okay, let's say we're $2.50 and a chocolate bar's 50p or 60p. What else can I buy with my £2.50 in a retailer? And for the most part, you couldn't buy a sandwich for $2.50. And again, bread's quite cheap. Sandwiches and snacks have actually got much, much, much better. Certainly in the UK, 10 years ago, you go into a petrol station, and a lot of the stuff you could buy that was part of the a food deal was fairly poor. You're looking at just like a energy drink or crisps, or a sort of a fairly bog standard sandwich or a pasty, something like that. And I know they were selling tons of that stuff, but actually for similar money or cheaper, you can have a protein bar that's actually half the calories, quite filling. You feel like you're eating a chocolate bar, so you feel like you're cheating. You're not cheating. It's really convenient. And actually, then you can have another meal later in the day. So you changed the context of comparing it to a chocolate bar to comparing it to a meal. So, yeah, exactly. So you're getting, right. and it's not a meal replacement bar.
Then how did you get it in the chocolate fixture?
That was incredibly hard.
Yeah, because that's what.
Because they didn't actually want to put us in the chocolate fixture.
Yeah, we're going to get really granular on this, because I think where you are in store is like everything.
Yeah,
I think
I could spend an hour talking to you about this.
Yeah, just talk me through something, because it's like, I think it's fucking genius. Like, you basically say, right, don't compare us to a chocolate bar.
Yeah.
Compare us to a meal deal. Oh, by the way, mate, you're going to put us next to the chocolate bar, and we're going to be double the price.
And I'm going to contradict myself as well here, in the sense that in some stores we wanted to be next to chocolate bars. Because
Which
that was
stores,
just because that was the sexiest place to be, for instance. So, but again, if you go into a big supermarket, chocolate bars are probably at the front of the store, not anymore.
Yeah.
And they're at the back of the store, but they'll also have a sports nutrition section, and they'll also have like a health section potentially.
Yeah.
And where should we be? Because you could argue a case for every one of those sections in a store. And the reality is now, most stores, including like the petrol station at the top of the road from here, which is a BP M&S, we're in that store in 3 or 4 locations.
Yeah.
And we kind of should be, because
last night.
You'll find us in multiple locations in there. It's one of my favourite examples, because we're in a fairly obscure part of Cornwall, but to even just get one location in store for us 10 years ago was incredibly difficult, because we said earlier, protein bars didn't sell. Retailers, especially small retailers like petrol stations, where they're small in physical size, and they don't have tons and tons of shelf space like a Tesco Extra would have. How do you fill those shelves? Because they don't have elastic shelves. For something to go in, something else has got to come out, and they want to be selling bread, milk, tea, coffee, chocolate bars, crisps, snacks, sandwiches, Coke, Red Bull. I mean, all those, you'd find in a local store. So for what's coming out for us to go in, and the way we actually started was, again, with the Growth Point investment. They had shares in a petrol station business called Rontec. They've exited now. They had quite a small shareholding, and through the investment with them, I got an introduction to Gerald, who owns Rontec, and I convinced him to give us a space in one of his petrol stations, and then that one turned into 10, and the 10 turned into 50, and the 50 turned into 500, and all of a sudden we went from being a sports nutrition brand that was in all the sports nutrition locations in the UK, such as Holland and Barrett and GNC.
Just to get some context, before this, you met this petrol station bloke. So when you went into Sainsbury's or whatever the first retailer was, you were in the sports nutrition section.
Yeah, so
but you knew you wanted to cross the Rubicon to the chocolate fixture or.
Yeah, so we wanted to cross the barrier because I realised, like, we started out, we built and we founded a sports nutrition business. We sold a mass market protein bar business. Yeah. So, and we transitioned from one to the other, and that wasn't something that was an accident until we fell into it. That was an absolute deliberate. So
was the rate of sale not great in that location, or you just knew it could be better?
In which location?
When you went into those initial stores, because that's what I thought was interesting.
With sports nutrition or protein bars?
With protein bars.
No, protein bars sold from day one, as we knew they would.
But they were in the sports nutrition section to begin with.
Yeah, so just backing up slightly, we still do have a sports nutrition business, which is probably still 10-12% of our turnover. It's still a very important part of our heritage and who we are and what we do. And it gives us the credibility and the authenticity, I think, to move into another category because we're so good with sports nutrition. We've got over 200 trademarks, design marks and pending patents for sports nutrition. We're in form sport. We never really spend enough time talking about it, so we never really get a chance to. But everywhere in 2012, 2013, everywhere those sports nutrition products could be, we were number one in Tesco, we were number one on Amazon, we were number one in Holland and Barrett. We were 2% of the entire turnover for GNC. But then fast forward, where's GNC now? I don't think they have a single store in the whole of the UK. So we were growing in declining retail because sports nutrition was ceasing to become specialty. It was becoming mass market. And what happened was I realised that our specialty 40, 50, 60 pound products that were doing well in specialty retail would never be found in a petrol station, for instance. And at their peak, GNC in the UK had 60 stores. There are 10,000 petrol stations. So this was all about how can we take what we've learned, move into something now that's more affordable, into more of a mass market location. It's still performance nutrition, it's still sports nutrition, it's still high protein, low sugar, but now it's £2.50, not £60, because so many people.
Was a grenade detonator, right?
Yeah, well, that was 45, but if things like our 50 caliber was was like 59.99, so it was quite a considered purchase. People like walking into a petrol station, seeing a specialised pre-workout product for 60 quid, probably more than they've spent on fuel, and buying it and walking out. It wasn't a thing then, and it's not a thing now, and I don't think it ever will be. But
this is so beautiful because as I said, we'll touch.
It's the transition.
It's the path, ultimately the path to exit as well. This sets a lot of the context as how big can it get, and I think so many brands they want to build a brand that can get a huge exit, but ultimately they're kind of shackled by the size of the category. Really,
yeah, and again, they might have the right product, but they might have the right product in the wrong category. And like I said, we're dominating weight loss. The number one selling weight loss product in the UK, and it never really felt like it could be. It just felt like a really nice lifestyle brand. It was great, but I'll give you an example. I read yesterday, for instance. Let's say we were still all-encompassing and focused on weight loss, and there's no such thing as a magic pill. Although now there's kind of a magic injection, isn't there? So
what is Ozempic?
Yeah, exactly. So I saw yesterday, for instance, that Weight Watchers have gone into administration.
Oh, I saw that as well. Yeah.
Because people now want an easy fix. They do want a magic pill. They do want a magic injection. We know that diet and training, nutrition are key, like I've said. But also imagine if you could kind of eat what you want and just have a jab. Now again, I don't agree with it. I don't know if it's here to stay or whatever. But if we'd have not diversified into more of a food business away from sports nutrition, I'd probably be quite worried at this point in terms of weight loss because, those injections have come along. Yeah. And, to give you an example, for instance, look at Virgin. Richard's been in business for 50 years and he started off with record shops, and now he doesn't have record shops. Virgin's still here, but they've diversified into other areas, which I think as a business, over a number of years, you have to look at Cadbury. Cadbury's 200 years old, but they've just partnered and acquired Grenade because we make something that they don't, and they've got something that we have. So you have to constantly be evolving,
constantly reinvent.
Yeah, exactly. And I think being honest with yourself, and so many people just do the same thing, all the time, and are then potentially surprised when they get the same result. And sometimes you have to change the input to change the output.
Yeah, definitely. So what I'm really fascinated about is, again, the commanding the price point. It's genius about how you compare it not, versus a chocolate bar. We're actually going to be compare us to a meal. Then when you go into retail, how do you get the protein bars into the chocolate fixture? And because and then what was that journey like? Because were you using data? Like, how were you?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, it's this journey is still a journey that is ongoing. But I guess to answer your question, we started. So we first 2015, we've launched the bar. It's doing really well in specialty, really well in GNC, Holland and Barrett, doing well in Tesco's. But again, we're looking at that chocolate category. And I don't think even we thought that we could disrupt chocolate, because I just thought the numbers would be huge, which they are huge. But we quickly became the number one selling protein bar in the UK, which wasn't really that difficult because protein bars didn't sell, as we said, because nobody made a good one. Yeah. So we quickly became number one. And then in about 2017, we'd hired someone again to start looking at the category data and specific like Nielsen data and IRI. And I became obsessed with, okay, so we're a big fish in a small pond. We're dominating protein bars in specialty. I wonder what this chocolate category actually looks like. Is it going to be absolute sort of pie in the sky? And we hired a data guy, and again we said, actually, tell us where we are in terms of chocolate sales. And we just got into the top 20 best-selling chocolate bars fairly early on. And actually,
when you weren't even in that fixture.
No, we weren't even in the fixture.
Do you know what the numbers were? Rate of sale per store per week?
I'd be making it up, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
No,
but
I mean,
to know what that.
I could specifically pretty much tell you what the top 5 were. And again, the order would change, from one month to the next. But, that top 5, you'd got Dairy Milk, Snickers, Mars.
How many are they doing?
Ferrero. In the millions and millions of bars, which you'd understand. But I think with the big boys I've just mentioned, that top 5, I think I was quite surprised at some of the numbers for, say, the lower half of, going towards the top 20. So Twix and Crunchy and Whisper and stuff, they were still in the millions, but it was kind of the low millions.
And you could go after that. So.
Yeah, I'm thinking, actually, we can make a dent here. And I don't know what they're going to do to stop it. And something interesting happened at the time where we were selling protein bars. And I think Mars had then clocked onto the idea that people were probably after something that was a bit better for them. They did a Mars protein bar. It did us a massive favour. And again, I think for 2 reasons, actually. First of all, it really started to legitimise the category and that protein was good for you because Mars were playing in it. And their Mars bar was £2. So they gave us their Mars protein bar, rather. So they gave us a fantastic leap from the price of a Mars bar into our, they really almost closed the gap to the £2.50.
Yeah, I suppose the cognitive lift for the buyer and the consumer is like, grenade 250 versus.
Well, all of a sudden, then consumer didn't have to spend 3 times as much; they had to spend an extra 50p.
There's Rory. Do you know much about Rory Sutherland? He's the sort of marketing genius, but he says there's Rolls Royce, I think it is, will always exhibit at yacht shows. Where you sell yachts, because you're at a yacht show, you're going to get loads of minted fuckers there, and they'll be like, oh yeah, the context of a Rolls Royce next to a yacht makes it seem bloody cheap, right? So, but I suppose Mars has almost done that for you in the sense they've
Well, you're judged by the company you keep.
Yeah.
And at the time, we were very much known in sports nutrition, and we were doing sports nutrition shows. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I just wanted to be so much more than a sports nutrition brand. So I didn't want to be standing next to sports nutrition companies at a fitness show, because I wanted to be standing next to Cadbury or Red Bull at a food show. So the difference, I just really had this aspiration to just compete with the very best, because I knew then and I know now we've got a world-class brand.
Yeah.
So, and actually, it's important to say, because I get asked this a lot in terms of people buying protein bars for sports nutrition. And people will say to me, you know, why should I buy your protein bars? You really shouldn't. You should be eating a balanced diet and you should be eating, you know, high protein and, you know, moderate carb or high fat or low carb or whatever you believe in. But you should be eating a good, nutritious diet. And most people probably know what that is. But the reality of day to day is they just don't do it because of time and life takes over and they end up out and about. You know, you've got to be really organised to be good at diet nutrition, including myself. I'm not very organised. I got sick of driving to petrol stations and buying something I really didn't want because I was hungry, to be honest. I was probably buying sushi or nuts or something at the time. And I thought, I'm sure I could get something better. So a part of it was me thinking, actually, I'd buy this. And if I'd buy it, so would other people. And actually, you know, I say to people all the time, you should be preparing your food yourself at home. And if you don't have time to do that or can't be bothered to do that, then you should probably be buying our supplements, to be fair. And it's just that simple. We don't, you know, we're not desperately trying to flog product to people. We're trying to give people a solution, a convenient solution to a problem that we know that they have.
Yeah,
and I think that's a good way of looking at you know some of these businesses. Just coming back in then to the top 20, I'm quite obsessive, and I became obsessed with this top 20. And you know, before you know it, we're in the top 10, and before you know it, we're in the top 5.
You're looking at category data.
I'm looking at category data, and I'm thinking,
how are you using the category data to like advance your position?
So basically, it's difficult to get like for like examples.
Yeah.
But let's make
that's when it becomes a game of chess, doesn't it? Kind of.
Well, imagine, you know, let's say, you know, let's take, Kinder Bueno. I think at the time they were either number 1 or number 2. And interestingly, actually, with Kinder, they were probably the only chocolate bar in the top 20 that had been invented in the last 20 or 30 years. It was amazing. Yeah, because I think the new kid
Kinder Bueno's new, quite a new thing.
Pretty new, yeah. Really? So put it this way, I remember Whisper coming out because my dad, when I was at school, my best friend, his dad was a rep for Cadbury. I grew up near Cadbury, so we've got a specific affinity with Cadbury. And I remember him giving me a new chocolate bar to try, and it was Whisper. It was like the early 80s, but Whisper was kind of considered the new kid on the block, because if you look at, you don't realise how long a lot of these chocolate bars have been around. Cream Egg's something like the 1950s.
Really?
It just hasn't changed because
What's the oldest chocolate bar?
It's everywhere. Oh, in the UK.
Is Cadbury's Dairy Milk the oldest? That's their...
and Bourneville probably would be up there. Probably
really?
Is. Yeah, probably is. So I think because this stuff's just been there forever, and it's a British institution, you know, that we all know and love. I think Cadbury's has, you know, many times been voted the nation's favourite brand, and, you know, for good reason. Just because it's been there forever, no one's ever really thought to replace it with something. Because I think in the past, if you want to compete with something, then you come up with something similar. So you've just got to make a better chocolate bar, which is, you know, fair enough. But I prefer competing with brands in a way that probably we're strong and they're weak. So, you know, I look at, and I think this is, you know, we could use Virgin Cola as an example. Virgin Cola. So Virgin Cola didn't that work? It didn't really work out. But again, they attacked Coke. Yeah. And I don't think they really, apart from a great brand name, a Virgin, I don't think they really had a good enough point of difference versus Coca-Cola, because they were both, you know, high sugar fizzy drinks. Yeah. So you were just going to swap a high sugar fizzy drink to another high sugar fizzy drink. And I think people probably said they preferred the taste of Virgin Coke versus regular Coke. But I don't think taste was necessarily, you know, enough in that circumstance. I actually don't think it tasted better either, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. And I don't like Coke either, so I actually like Pepsi. But we digress. But going back to you know, the top 5 in confectionery, I just became obsessed with how can we become number 1, and distribution points is key. So let's say, you know, if you're Kinder Bueno and you've got, you know, 200,000 distribution points and you're doing 5 million.
When you say distribution points, that's not stores, right?
No, it's not stores. It's a number of facings in stores. So you might have 4 facings in a store, which would be 4 distribution points. Or you could take store numbers. But whatever metric you decide, you got that number for the stores that we know that they're in, and then the number that we know they're selling, based either on unit volume or cash rate of sale, and then you look at our product and make as direct a comparison as you can. And let's say that the number 1 selling chocolate bar is in 100,000 locations and he's doing, you know, 5 million. Well, and then we look at us and we're in 10,000 locations, but are doing 4 million, we've actually got the better rate of sale. So you think, well, if we've got 10,000, we've got less distribution points. So we're saying, well, look how many they've got and what they do. Look how many we've got and what they do. And also, look how much cash it puts in the till. Because one of the first conversations I had with Rontech and the petrol stations were, every time you sell a chocolate bar, you make 13p. Every time you sell one of our bars, you make £1.50. What would you rather have in the till? You've got to sell 10 chocolate bars for every one of our protein bars. That's quite compelling to a retailer. So all of a sudden, our fairly high price is actually a massive selling point.
Yeah. Did you use, so then, because, sorry, I love really getting deep on this. I find it such a fascinating game. But like with the petrol stations, did you almost use that? Because that's when you're in all. I was in the BP last night, mate. Like you're in. It's like, and then you've got the big.
It's everywhere.
It's like a gondola end, or not a gondola end, but like a FSDU.
Because you know what they've realised. So again, this goes back to another conversation I had with Rontech fairly early on, and Gerald Ronson told me this. He said, where do you want to be in my store? And I said, at the till point. And he said, no, you don't.
Why did he say that?
Because everything sells at the till points. They don't learn anything. So he said, yeah, so you can put, because everyone sees it.
Yeah.
So
what he said about you don't learn anything is, so what, where
because he knew if he put us at the till point, we'd sell quite a lot, but it wasn't going to live at the till point forever because that is prime real estate and people pay for that. So, it wouldn't have been a fair trial. So he said, I'm going to put you at the back of the store. And basically, which he did, and I went to that store, it was in Peterborough, and I met the store owner and I gave him a T-shirt and gave him some samples of bars. And I said, everyone who comes into the store, ask him if they want to buy a protein bar. And explained again you could make 13p or you could make £1.50 or whatever. What would you rather have? And then we got the data, and then we did that with 10 stores and 50 stores, like I said. And before you know it, not only are we outselling chocolate 10 to 1, but we're actually their cash margin is tenfold as well.
Winning, sort of
so everyone's winning.
Yeah.
And actually, again, really apart from the confectionery companies, but to a certain extent, people are still buying chocolate, but also they've kind of had it themselves for the last 100 years.
Yeah.
So, that's how business works. Someone comes along and, we're a lot more expensive and we're a different product. If you want to go and buy chocolate, go and buy chocolate. We all like chocolate. But if you want something different, this is something different. So we've been an absolute nightmare to compete with for confectioners because there's not a lot they could do. Coming back to the Mars protein bar example, for instance, it helped out with the price point. We've actually never ever spoken to Mars either, which is weird because we've spoken to everybody else, but we've never spoken to Mars. It's strange, but especially seeing as they were interested in this category, and I can't remember the numbers of how we would outsell their Mars protein bars, but I mean, it wouldn't even be in the same planet in terms of what we sell versus what they sell. And there's a reason for that, and that is they do a Mars bar, which is fantastic, and then we do a protein bar, which is fantastic. And in the middle, you've got that sort of Mars protein bar. I'm going back 10 years. And it's not the best protein bar. And it's also not the best chocolate bar. It goes bang in the middle of, you're a little, and people are a bit, nah.
Well, compete what you're strong at, they're weak at.
Exactly. And I bought a few boxes of that because also I love the competition.
It's mad. Yeah, as a consumer,
that's exactly
tried it once because it was a novelty thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's too much of a heavy lift for the consumer. It's like it's so entrenched. A Mars bar is a fucking Mars bar, and then a protein bar is you own that category, And I think it's just.
And we know where they're made, and they've done a really, really good job with that. But the problem is, it's fairly high in sugar. You've got to overcome the sugar issue. This may have changed now, but I think at the time it still had about 13 grams of sugar. It was just too high.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden compromises start sneaking in, and consumers and brand owners don't like compromises. So it kind of ended up being no man's land. And I bought a few boxes of those bars. And I ate the first sort of 2 or 3, and I thought, I just wanted it to be better, or a Mars bar, to be honest. So I knew then, I thought, actually, again, because this could kill the category, to be fair. But I think collectively, if we had 20 people in our office at the time, I don't think we ever finished that box of whatever it was, 15 or 16 Mars protein bars.
Yeah,
we threw them away.
One thing you've got in one of your superpowers, mate, I'm picking up, is just this ability to ask really kind of commonsensical questions.
Well, I'm brutally honest, which people
honest.
Nowadays, and that's why I don't like social media, because it's mostly bullshit.
But also it's just like, it's just asking, but also questions that people are kind of scared to ask. It's like, well, why hasn't chocolate been in, Cadbury's Dairy Milk's been, why hasn't no one innovated in it? Or it's just quite ambitious but simple fucking questions.
I've always questioned things.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of when I was at school, I think so many people are just happy to just go with the flow, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I found school unbelievably boring.
Yeah.
Just because I was quite bright, and I've got a really good photographic memory, and school's strange in the sense that you get taught something, and then you regurgitate it back, and then that means you're clever. And I don't really understand that.
Yes,
So I just found school quite boring. And I was very, very good at spelling specifically, probably better then than I am now. And I remember once, and I actually went all through my infant and junior school, and I'm not making this up, I never got anything wrong. Where we did exams and little tests and stuff, I always got 100%. And then there was a case when I was in junior school, and it was a maths paper, and I handed it in, and the teacher marked it, and I'd got one wrong, and I was so mortified about getting something wrong. And the teacher said, "Oh, it's funny, everyone gets that one wrong." And I said, "I'm sure I'm right." And she said, "Well, no, because this is the answer in the book." And I said, "Well, can you work it out?" Anyway, I dug my heels in, and she went through the question, and the answer book was wrong. And for years, they'd been marking all the kids' homework as wrong, when it was actually probably correct. And they had to change the answer book. It was Gin Maths, I think this particular book was. So my record of not getting anything wrong stood, and I became this kind of perfectionist. I've never been scared to challenge things if I think I'm right. It makes me like a real arrogant cock, doesn't it? But then I was thinking as well, because obviously we've had lots and lots of failures with Grenade and the brand. Failure is actually where you learn. And I think that was my point about going through school and getting everything right. I learnt very little, because actually then the failures are where you learn. Getting things wrong is where you learn. If you just keep getting things right all the time, it's not particularly character building. So I actually learnt, and years later, I was scared as a kid to get things wrong. And now I cherish getting things wrong, because it's a chance to learn.
Yeah, what are some of your favourite failures on the journey?
I mean, talking protein bars, we had 41 versions that we didn't like.
Yeah.
But there were 41 versions of how we learned more about how to make the protein bar that we actually wanted.
Yeah.
As opposed
Any
to
sort of failures on the way to the exit deals?
Oh, I mean, there'd be stacks. I mean, there'd be certain deals I'd do. There'd be other deals I wouldn't do. There'd be people I'd hire who I didn't. There'd be people I wouldn't hire, who I did. So there's always things you'd look back and be, reminisce. Because again, if I invented a retrospectoscope, I could go back and do things differently. But otherwise, for the most part, I'm really happy and proud of the journey that we've had today, and actually we're still on, because I still feel, we talked about Cadbury's 200 years old. Grenade is 15. So where do you think Grenade could be in 200 years' time?
Yeah.
So
where do you think that could be?
I really don't know. I mean, it's really impossible at the moment to say where Grenade could be in a year or two's time, because of everything's going on in the world, and the pace at which we've got change and AI and whatever. But I genuinely believe that people will keep training. I think nutrition is going to be, just as important and more important than ever as we live longer and all these diseases and stuff out there. People have really got to think about what they put in their body. And as always, we'll keep disrupting ourselves and making the best product that we can, putting them in places that consumers find convenient. And most importantly, enjoying the journey. So few people just, and actually, you were talking with James Watt earlier. James did a great post yesterday about he wished he'd enjoyed the journey more. I'd have to agree with him in the sense that I have enjoyed it, but I've missed a lot. I mean, I don't think I'm successful. So, because I know people who I think are successful and they don't think they're successful, so there's always someone who's got a bigger brain and a faster plane. But
I like that.
Yeah, but well, I spent time. I was on Necker with Richard B a few years ago, and again I was looking at one of the neighbouring islands which he also owns, and I was saying to him actually, what does it feel like to get there? And he said, I don't know where there is. Entrepreneurs just can't help themselves. It's a fantastic skill to just be always hungry. But also it can be a real curse where you're sort of never satisfied. So having contentment's really important, because again, he's looking at his neighbours. One of his neighbours owns Google, so you're always looking at the next person up, and it's
how
dangerous.
have you got better at finding peace and contentment?
I've got better at it by comparing it to training. So when I first set out training, when I was 14 years old, I had certain things I wanted to lift. I wanted to bench, deadlift, or squat X amount, and they, I just had goals. I surpassed all those goals, and then things can get a bit boring. You just don't keep on getting bigger and stronger. So I changed the goals, and I found contentment by realizing that being happy and healthy gives you all the wealth that you ever need. And actually, everything I've achieved today is great. And I'll go and do other things, and I'll go and do more things, and those things will change. So I think you just stop beating yourself up for not having done more, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah,
it's interesting because there's a guy, because I'm the same, like I'm always the next guest, next hurdle, next thing.
You do have to do that to a point, but you also have to just say, actually, you've got to stop, take a breath and go. You actually mentioned an interesting thing earlier, where you've obviously come to my house in Cornwall, and when you were here last time or the time before, you were on your own. There was one of you. Now there's three of you. So you have to keep making these comparisons,
and it's also
and actually give yourself a pat on the back.
Yeah. I mean, I'm the worst at that.
It's improvement.
Yeah.
And sometimes people think improvement is financial. Sometimes it is. Sometimes, we had years at Grenade where the business looked fairly flat financially, but we had a better business. So let's say the turnover or the profit might not have gone up, it might have gone down, but then thinking that, but actually last year, we had 20 people and I wasn't happy with 5 of them, and now we've got 40 people and they're all superstars, but we're turning over less, but that's a better business.
This is exactly what I needed to hear. And as I say, all these questions are selfish questions, right? Because that's kind of what we're at now, is like if we were to do this 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, it's me on my ones, kind of walking around fucking Cornwall like a lemon,
And you've been chasing me for years. Yeah. And actually, fair play, because you have persevered. And I did say I'll do it, but also there has to come a point where it makes sense for sort of both parties as well. Because I don't do as many interviews as I should do, just because, again, time and whatever. But I'm really glad you stayed persistent with it, and the podcast has grown, and rightly so. And again, then it's all levels. You just keep going to the next level.
As I say, it's mad that this week has been, as I say, kind of two big dogs, yourself and Michelle Roos. But I think you're right. I'm looking at the wrong metrics in terms of like when's the next bit of money coming in, and actually, it's like. I've come down. We went for a banging meal at Four Boys in Rock last night.
Yeah, Rock's lovely.
It's absolutely gorgeous. And I was like, the sun was setting.
That's Four Brothers that own that. Yeah. I've not actually. They'll love the plug. To be fair, I've not actually eaten in there, it's been Four Boys.
So good.
But it's a great. Yeah, it's a great name. I'll go there this week.
Yeah. I mean, the focaccia bread is just like otherworldly.
But I love to see people. I don't know them from Adam, but I love to see people do well.
Yeah.
I genuinely I get off on it. I think. I spent a lot of time in the US. I actually had a house in America until fairly recently.
Whereabouts in America?
In Florida. I had that for 14, 15 years. And I think I've sold it now, but I think that's very much an American mentality where they're really pleased for you. And I'm not sure we've got the same mindset in the UK. I'm not actually sure they've got the same mindset in the US anymore either. Yeah. But I genuinely... If I see someone doing well, even in a competing business, let's say I was chatting earlier about competition. You know, if you're just on your own in a category, that's one thing. But let's say there's 3, 4, 5 brands and you're all good. You can maybe have, you know, a smaller share but of a much bigger category, but collectively you can all do things differently, market differently, but pull more consumers, and you can share consumers, you can learn more. I think it's a really good way of keeping you competitive and honest and making the best product you can. So I think competition is really good.
Who did I interview? I can't remember who said this, but like linking this back to your focus on your strengths, their weaknesses. Competition's a mirror. So I don't know who told me that, and it was like, I can't remember, but someone was like, competition's a mirror, and what so many people do is they try and copy the competition, and actually the competition is like, be more Grenade. And
if you look at the competition, you tend to look like the competition.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if anything, what his point was is the mirror should be like, the whole sort of point of that is focus on more of what you do. You know? Well,
I mean, you know, we're a niche business, but I love niche businesses because we've actually got 50% market share. So we've got a very dominant position in still a fairly niche business, which we think again can grow exponentially, certainly around the world. Because, you know, do we have the number one selling protein bar in the world? No. Do I think we can do it? Absolutely. So that's the next goal, really. There'll be other smaller goals before then, but that's an ambition to make it the best selling protein bar in the world. Because who's made anything that you can think of? And it's the best-selling item in the world.
Yeah.
I can't think of any examples at the moment of people who are still alive where they've actually got the market leader.
The bit I want to talk about is that we may have not had growth in terms of absolute terms, but we've grown and we're a better business. Because a lot of people will go through that kind of period where it's kind of just
You think you're getting nowhere.
You think
and that's perfectly normal. Yeah, so that is normal. I still feel like that.
Yeah,
but I have days like that today where I look around and I think, am I achieving anything here? Because I've been such a high achiever.
Yeah.
If I don't have these like absolutely monumental days where I've done something extraordinary, I think it's been a wasted day, which is terrible, really, because sometimes like you can have a day where you just kind of chill a bit, and that itself, just taking some time to pause, actually makes it a really productive day for a different reason.
So, you know, we were saying like how there's the sort of the theme of like, entrepreneurs are never satisfied, right? And I think there's that, but also, and this is what James Smith taught me. He goes, I need to be productive to be happy, and I think, and it's a really good way of looking at it.
But he's also productive because he's happy.
Yes, yeah.
As well, it's a vicious circle.
Interesting. Yeah, that's.
To be fair, Richard B always says that he's not happy because he's successful. Yeah. He's successful because he's happy.
What underrated lessons you've taken from him that you'd only get from him by being on Necker Island with him?
I mean, again, the not knowing where there is a really powerful one. The power of simplicity. I love how he looks at businesses, and I've been really fortunate.
So how go into the
well, for instance, so I was in Africa with Richard a few years ago, and he was sort of sitting in his chair where he looks with his PA, and they were, again, he's got a fantastic view of the Sabi Sands. It overlooks Sabi Sands, incredible view. And again, you can see wildlife coming past and stuff. And as always, he's got messages and emails and stuff to do. And I think Helen went off to go and do something, and Richard was just sort of sat there on his iPad. And I was just sort of walking past, and our eyes caught. And he said, "Oh, do you want to kind of have a sit down?" He was looking at buying Grenade at the time. So this was 2017, which didn't happen actually, but I'm glad that didn't happen, but I'll come into that later. He was looking at Grenade. We sat and chatted about Grenade, and I said, "Oh, what are you working on?" And he was working on Virgin Galactic, and he got it on his iPad, and he just showed me the 20 questions that he was asking his team about space travel.
What were some of those questions?
Oh, just what does it cost to build a spaceship, basically? How long would how many trips could you do in a day or in a week? You know, how many crew there'd be, the staff that were involved, where it would go from, where it would go to. Just the most simple questions you could think, what each trip would cost them in terms of their hard costs. What do they think they could charge a consumer? I mean, just the most basic question you could think of for any business. And it was space travel. Yeah. And I just thought, God, he simplified that. Yeah, I mean, there'll be a load of stuff beyond that, obviously, but he just likes simplicity. And the answers to those questions would tell him whether or not that was worth pursuing or not.
It's mad, mate.
The power of simplicity should never be underestimated, to be fair.
Yeah, because there's this is what I was asking James Watt about, right? And I I think the smart answer lies in the dumb questions. Like we're so often looking for a great answer, but actually it's like
I don't have any clever answers. If you noticed, I can just tell you what we've done.
No, but and then so I was speaking to James Watt about this, and because actually I think what founders need is a better set of questions, because so what some of the ones, you know, James asks himself are what are the biggest 5 problems in my business happening right now? That's one. He goes, how do I 10x the growth of my business in 6 months? They're like questions to get you out of like the small thinking, or just questions. The other one I like is like, what would this look like if it was easy? Which is Tim Ferriss. And it's like, okay, suddenly all this bollocks that's in your head fucks off. And you're like, oh, I've just got to do that. So out of everything on your journey, mate, what are like some 1, 2, 3 questions that you sort of like to ask yourself, not necessarily to the team, but like, it's like just to get a steer on how things are going, or like if you've got a problem, you're like, I don't know, it could be.
I still think it comes back down to my 5 or 6 rules of investing, as in the sense looking at Grenade, and again going back 10 years and looking at the growth of the protein bars. First thing going, would I eat this? Because if I wouldn't, why would anyone else?
Yeah.
Secondly, would I pay that? Where would I buy it from? What are my alternatives? What else is on the market? And I think just being really honest with yourself it is pretty important, because I think people aren't honest with themselves, and they convince themselves that they've got different answers maybe to those questions than they really have. So I think, for me, is there a better one? Why can I make a best version of this that's not just slightly better than the next brand? Because why bother? Can I make something that's just miles ahead of the competition? And actually, to be fair, when Mondelez invested us in 2021, they had some very interesting thoughts about India, China, and America in terms of launching there. And actually, we were in America at the time, and we're going back to America with Oreo. And they said, with America, for instance, can you be the number 1 selling protein bar and hold it for the next 25 years? And that was one of their questions. And I said, no.
Why?
And they said, because at the time we'd got, I think, again, going back to say 2021, our protein bars made with, Belgian sugar-free chocolate were better than American chocolate bars, which are made with compound chocolate. But that's what I think.
What's compound chocolate? Is that like?
So compound chocolate is a specific chocolate which has got a different melting point and is better sold in countries where they've got hotter temperatures. The UK is not a hot place.
Is that why English chocolate tastes
that's
so
why
different?
That's one of the reasons it tastes different, because having a chocolate bar in Texas
is fucking rank, I think.
This actually answers the question. So I think our chocolate's better.
As in the UK?
As in UK versus America, let's say. But there's a reason for that, because I grew up with it and you grew up with it, because we grew up with Cadbury. Yeah. Therefore, we like Cadbury. Now, the American consumer can like ours. They can think, actually, yeah, that Grenade bar's nice, but they still like theirs because they grew up with Hershey. Yeah. The chocolate their mums gave them when they were 5 or 6.
Candies, don't they?
Yeah, that's the thing you see. So they really like Hershey. And the chocolate, which again, probably we don't.
I'd never thought
well, because you like what you grew up with.
Yeah. And what is that? How's that different to India and China? Do they have a different palate?
So China sounds bizarre. Snacking's not really a thing in the same way. They'll snack on different foods than we would snack on.
What, such as?
Well, they like stuff that we wouldn't eat, don't they? So again, you get things like insects as snacks, and there's just, they've just got a lot stranger, probably strange to us.
Yeah, so
put it this way, chocolate's not really a thing. They don't snack on chocolate when they're kids. India, again, hot country, an enormous amount of poverty. So you've got, there's not really that middle class potentially in India. It's getting there, but you've just got really rich people and really poor people. And I think, so again, chocolate wasn't so much of a thing. And again, you've got huge import taxes of like 70% at the time, which actually now as of this week are probably going to change. And you've got a hot country and the demographics not really there the same. So some of these markets, I think even, Cadbury's there. And I think for the size of the country, Cadbury would do better probably in smaller Scandinavian countries than it does in the likes of India. So all of these countries have their own anomalies, let's say. And so I thought the question from Mondelez, can you be number one and hold it? And me saying no. And as such, we pulled out the US. So, but now we've got Oreo. And Americans like Oreo. And if they want Oreo in a protein bar...
Would you change the chocolate to compound? Or
no, I wouldn't. Okay. I'd still keep it the same chocolate. So I'd still keep it the same... I'm a big consumer, right? So like, but I would say the one that... Still got the issue with melting point. So our chocolate will melt at a lower temperature than compound chocolate does. But that's where then we either compromise, which you don't want to do, or we have an incredible delivery option where it's kind of refrigerated to someone's front door. We've done that in the past. We were shipping protein bars in 2021. We were shipping protein bars to Texas in a heat wave. And we were getting them all the way from Europe to someone's front door in Texas, and they were perfect. The problem being then, if that person wasn't in, they melt on the doorstep, and then it's our fault.
Yeah.
And then you've got a shitty message of a consumer, probably to me, saying, you know, your product's rubbish.
Yeah.
So we can only control the part of the delivery that we can control. I think, again, you know, to probably say then, what are the things that you've learned? Just anything you can control, you should try and control it, but there's a lot of things beyond our control. And sometimes that's the thing, like the chocolate bar on the doorstep in Texas. I can't do anything about that. If someone's not in, they're not in. But the thing is there, and that's interesting, that product was ruined and then it's my fault somehow. I can't do anything about that. So sometimes you have to be careful the battles that you fight, because we're not going to win that one.
No, for sure. I want to go back to just Richard Branson, so like the simplifying stuff. I think that's really interesting. Anything else you picked up from him? And I think there's like two types of learnings. Again, I get this from guests, right? So we hit record, but the osmosis learnings are like stuff that you pick up like from osmosis by kind of just watching someone versus what they actually do. So I suppose with you, mate, rocked up today, you're training your fucking tits off, grinding it out. We got to wait, you know, set up.
I hadn't trained all week, and you know,
I'm fucking going for it.
Well, you know, I'm trying to be a little bit more selfish, because you were about 9 hours early. But I love the fact you've gone to a lot of trouble to come here. So thanks for that. And also, I'd much rather you early than late. But I thought it would have been easy to just not finish what I was doing and then started this early and again disrupt my day. But I'm training again. For me is really one of my non-negotiables. All week I've been doing that. I need to train, but I need to do this. I should train, but I need to do that. And I've been doing it for the last 5 or 6 days. Look, do you know what? I thought I'd got an hour and a half to probably, or nearly 2 hours to train this morning.
No, but that's what I'm saying.
And the gateway's like, bollocks, Dan's here.
No.
So do you know what? I'll just finish. But I'm really glad I did, because that's kind of done now, and then we can get a better interview. Otherwise, I'll be sitting there thinking, bastard interrupted my workout.
Oh no, exactly.
So I'm
said on the email, but we'll be there. But there's osmosis learnings, you know. And I picked, again, Julian Metcalf Itsu's like what I took from you is sort of, you know, self-discipline, and with Julian it was I mean, this guy, like before I'm on, you know, we're setting up like we're setting up now. He's on the blower to someone about this fucking one obscure ingredient to go into his seaweed snacks, and he's relentless about it. As soon as the interview's done, straight away on the blower to someone in Korea, then he's on a plane to Korea to go and find this obscure. It's like this just total obsession.
I know, Julian. As founders always talk to other founders, because we're all unemployable, and ultimately, and you know, you won't get on with all of them, but for the most part, you just have these immediate, fantastic relationships and bonds with other founders, because we just know stuff that other people don't know. And you know, I've never met June. I've spoke to him a few times about aviation, actually, because he was asking my thoughts on the helicopter I fly, and I was chatting to him, and it's like the first conversation we ever had. You just feel like I could have known this guy for years, because all the things he doesn't need to tell me that stuff, because I know what he's done, I know what he's built, I know what's going through his mind, and I know when he's chatting to me, there should be 10 other people he should be chatting to as well. So I know that anywhere an entrepreneur is, they've always got to be somewhere else. So I understand all that, whereas most people, unless you're an entrepreneur, they just don't get that.
Yeah. And so on the osmosis learnings, what else could you take from Richard just by hanging out with him?
I mean, I think, and actually not so much. Well, again, you have learnt this from Richard, but I knew this one, but I think it reaffirmed what I already knew. How he's got this amazing energy, how he just treats the people around him and interacts with the people around him. It's quite incredible.
Any examples of that?
Well, just the staff that he's got. You know, that it's very, very. They've got the utmost respect for him, and he has for them. He's got this incredible energy. He's unbelievably kind, and selfless. He really cares about people, and you don't see it that often. I don't think. He's incredibly humble, and he loves his training. And again, he adores his family and his businesses and his staff. He's just one of the nicest people you could ever want to meet. He really is. And you can see why he's done so well. Is it because he's the hardest working or the cleverest or whatever? No, he's just Richard.
Yeah.
And the team around him as well, they just want to do a good job for him and work hard for him. And again, he's just got this incredible presence. And I say that I knew this before. I used to train when I was 16, 17 years old. I was working in my local gym for minimum wage. I used to train a guy called Stuart Sapcut. And he had 4 Ferraris. He was running Sapcut the Builders. And he was my first and last ever personal training client. And I was earning £2 an hour at the gym. And Stuart used to pay me £10 for the hour to train. And he used to come twice a week. And he must have got sick of the questions I was asking him, because I was like a sponge. And again, he treated me differently than other people. He was always really kind. He gave me time. He was always very generous. And I learned then, actually, because I think there was this myth that really successful, wealthy people weren't nice people. And he was the first probably really wealthy person I ever met. And he was just so unbelievably kind. So it just and gracious. And again, he'd start training and he'd turn his phone off, and his phone wouldn't get turned back on again until we'd finished. And I was earning £70 a week in the gym, and I had an hour of this guy's time, and I obviously wanted to get the most out of his workout and do what I could in the time that we had. And Stuart's like 6'1", 6'2", was kind of quite thin, never used to eat that much, running around very busy. He was never going to be a big guy. But I used to really look forward to those sessions, because again, I was learning a lot. And when I was 21, he gave me £210 for my birthday, which, remember, was 3 times my salary at the time. So I just said, I can't accept that. It's too generous. He insisted I had it, and I spent the money on a car alarm. Actually, I was into my cars at the time, and it paid for my car alarm. And I remember what I learned from that. Again, it was very generous. I mentioned it to someone else in the gym, and I said, "Oh, Stuart gave me some money for my 21st," and they said, "Oh, how much?" So it was £210, like £10 for each year. And do you know what their response was? Can you have a guess? Have a guess what their response was when I told him that this man had given me £210 for my birthday? This was in the 90s, this was.
Is that what that would have been with adjusted for sort of inflation? That's what, like £2,000, £3,000?
No, it wouldn't have been that level. But what they actually said was they thought how mean it was that he hadn't given me more because he was so wealthy.
Oh, what fucking...
And that was their response. And I just thought, what was he supposed to give me? 210 million. I mean, it was just, it's just, and I learned something from him. I learned more from someone else's response, where I think he'd been very generous, but the perception was he'd been mean.
God.
And I just thought, what is wrong with people?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, this is another thing I want to talk to you about.
So you've got to be very careful, because in terms of actually making money, it definitely creates a lot more problems than it solves. I'll just say that.
Really? What are some of those problems?
Yeah, well, because you can't win. Because the thing is, then, if you take someone for dinner and then you don't pay, you're tight.
Oh, God.
And if you do, you flash.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
What sort of, what are some things some beliefs you had before you made money that when you made money were actually kind of wrong, or you sort of changed your mind about?
I guess the probably when you... And I was, I grew up in quite a poor family, so I used to have free school meals. So I used to get a free school dinners. I think I was the only person in my year that had that green ticket who had free school dinners. And I never got bullied at school, but I probably could have been bullied at school. I know I was quite conscious of the fact that my friends were going and paying for their school dinner, and my parents didn't earn enough to be able to pay for mine. So I decided to just go home for for meals at lunchtime and not be in school. I hated school anyway. And I couldn't bear to spend a minute longer than I needed to be there. So I used to literally walk a mile home, spend 10 minutes in the house, and walk a mile back again. It broke the day up, and I didn't have to stand there with that sort of green ticket. So I think, to answer your question, I used to think that having money would solve all these things and solve problems. I remember my parents arguing a lot about money when I was a kid. You know, my mum didn't work. She had osteoporosis. She then did go and get a job. She had to retire early through ill health. And then my dad was a heavy goods vehicle mechanic, and again, just worked 6-7 days a week for just literally no money. So I just remember thinking, like, the money was always the root of the arguments. And I just remember thinking that, you know, I could, if I was wealthy, if I had money, it would solve all these things. And yes, it does. You know, you don't worry about paying your electric bill, but it does cause potential issues with other people. You have to be very careful who you surround yourself with.
What problems do you still have that money will never be able to solve?
I think no matter what you do for people, sometimes it's never enough, because, you know, if I went and gave £1 million to a charity, for instance, they come back next year and they're asking for 2 million. So it's like, you just, I think enough is never enough sometimes. Like, you have to be careful with that. So I believe, again, that you have to give with a really good heart. So anything I've given away, you know, the past, and I won't go into it. I've done quite a lot in terms of charity. And
what about personally or mentally? Like, because this is one thing. Who was it who said this? He goes, I think it's Chris Williamson. He says, the best advice, you know, one of the common questions is like, what's advice you'd give yourself 20 years ago? And what Chris says, he goes,
I hate that question.
But what Chris, fucking shit question. But then what Chris adds is this beautiful nuance. He goes, mate, it's the same thing today.
Yeah, that's actually that's I've just realised that is the answer. Exactly the same.
That's the beauty of it. It's like, people think you go on this massive journey. You may have this, you've got this wonderful house in Cornwall. Like, what is the stuff that it's just so, the problems that are baked into you? And I asked this because I'm all over the shop in terms of my mental, like, health can go fucking helter-skelter crazy. So, and I think it's just good for people to see the human side. Like, yeah, how are you a bit nuts?
Oh God, I mean, I'm pretty eccentric, I guess. So
the whips outside would suggest.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I like cars and things, but I don't like all this sort of. I've had Lamborghinis and stuff, and they're great, but I like stuff that's more unusual. So I think, you know, if you go and win the lottery and people go and buy a red Ferrari, brilliant. But I don't know, it just feels like such an obvious car to go and buy. And I think when I was training Stuart years ago, he had 4 red Ferraris, and I never wanted one. I drove a Fiat Panda because he had loads of problems with the cars, and I didn't want the problems. So I've never ever bought a Ferrari because of what I saw him go through with his over 30 years ago. It's interesting, isn't it? So I think. I guess, you know, to answer your question, what would you tell yourself 20 years ago? I knew I had to work hard. I've always done that. So, you know, I knew that. Enjoy the journey, probably be more aware of the journey. Not enjoy the journey, because I have enjoyed the journey. Be more aware of the journey. And try and live in the moment a bit more, I think, for the next few
years. You can't smell the roses from a galloping horse, can you?
Well, there are some things I've missed that...
What did you miss?
Well, when for instance, I bought a plane I was in a plane crash years ago. And after I was in a plane crash with a friend of mine flying, I thought I really should go and learn to fly a plane. So I did that about a year or two later when I could afford to do it.
That's mental. Like, that says so much about your mindset. Like, most people,
it was either I'll attack things head on. So it was either you're never going to fly again, or you're going to learn to fly a plane. So I think maybe that's the stuff that's mental. A lot of people in my position just want to be sat in the back of an aircraft or sat in the back of something, or the back of a helicopter. That's not enough for me. I want to be flying it. So,
mate, yeah. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so I went and did my private pilot's license. I passed in the bare minimum amount of time, which was 45 hours back in the day. So I couldn't have done it any quicker. It comes back to this thing, holding myself to a high standard. So I passed my pilot's test, and then I think I did it for the wrong reasons, because I did it because I'd been in a plane crash and it felt like a good thing to do. And when I passed it, I was bored of it. So I flew for a bit and took my girlfriend flying and my mum flying and that. And then I was hadn't really got any reason to do it, and I went on to do something else. So years later, but I always regretted then letting that pilot's license lapse, because it's quite a special thing to get, because the vast majority of people can't fly a plane.
Yeah.
So but then I also hadn't, I'd got time and no money. And then years later, I'd probably got money and no time.
Wow.
So flying again privately became a way to save some time. and I revalidated my license in sort of 2016, bought a plane in 2017, and the plane was delivered. And when my plane was delivered to me at the airfield, I wasn't there. I was in a meeting at Grenade, and I remember the fact I didn't see the plane being delivered. I was disappointed because it had been like a 20-year journey to that point to buy and own a plane. And just, I don't know, I'd have liked to have been an hour early and just sort of seen it land. Sounds silly, but it would have been important to me at the time. And the fact that 8 years later, I still remember that, obviously, you know, I shouldn't have been somewhere else. And I think this was James Watt's post yesterday, the things that he's missed. It made me think about the things I've missed. And yeah, put it this way, I'd have not done that meeting. I can't even remember what the meeting was, so it can't have been that important.
Yeah.
But the problem is when you've got a business, everything's important. And I think, you know, to answer the question of what would you tell yourself, learn what is and isn't important. It's hard to tell at the time because a conversation...
What is that for you right now?
A conversation, I think it comes back to this enjoying the journey and patting yourself on the back for certain achievements and certain milestones. Because building a business is like climbing a mountain.
Yeah.
And it's a long way up the mountain, but you only get a very temporary view from the top. And after you've had that temporary view from the top,
next mountain.
you're looking at the next mountain. You're also coming back down that mountain.
Yeah.
So, you know, every step of that journey is more important than just that temporary view from the top.
Yeah.
So, I think, I'd want to try and make sure I have time to sort of savor the moments that come and go through the life of an entrepreneur. And just live in the moment a little bit more, as opposed to thinking, right, I've done that now, on to the next thing, you know, and racing on. But it's a really fine balance between, just being a workaholic, which most entrepreneurs are, and then I'm actually inherently quite lazy. So if I'm not careful, if I'm not working flat out, I could really easily go the other way.
Yeah.
You know, I live in Cornwall at the moment, only until the end of this year, and I love it down here. It's super chilled and super laid back. The problem is your world can get very small.
But you're leaving at the end of the
living in
year.
Cornwall. I'm still keeping this house, but I've bought an estate in the Cotswolds.
Right.
And actually, your point about, you know, the neighbours and who you surround yourself with, and always wanted to be somewhere else. You know, one of my neighbours in the Cotswolds is Rupert Murdoch. You know, so it's you've got to be careful who you look at,
surround
because
yourself
you
with,
can actually you can look at someone potentially and just therefore retrospectively think that you're a complete failure because of my failure compared to Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah,
so you have to be very careful with the people that you surround yourself with.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. It's like you're always looking at who's ahead of you, never who's behind you, because there's always someone behind you who'll be looking at you thinking, oh, wow, you're doing so well.
This is the mistake that people make with social media. I don't follow anyone on social media that I don't know personally.
Yeah.
Because otherwise I'm just following a completely random stranger and I'm seeing their show reel that they want me to see.
Yeah.
I don't know that person. I just don't think that's good. So I think...
But you're comparing their show reel to your bloopers reel.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think the advice I'd give to anyone watching this in terms of social media is try following people who, again, you know, or have less than you. Because everyone does it. They follow people who've got more than them. How do you think that makes you feel?
Yeah.
That's why most people, you know, enter this doom loop of like doom scrolling and whatever. And social media is actually quite bad for them. Yeah. And I think social media in future is going to become like smoking.
Yeah. Oh, God,
I don't think you'll want to look at it because you won't want to look at someone else's highlight reel and like you said, compare it to your bloopers reel.
Yeah. I mean, I'm the worst at that, and it's insidious.
Everyone does it.
I mean, everyone does it. Yeah. One thing I want to talk about.
Sorry, there's actually a tip for that, to be fair, as well, which I sort of follow. I can't remember who told me this. I think it was Alfie Days told me this. He's got quite a big following on social media. And he said, put your social media apps in a folder on the very last page of your phone. Yeah. So you have to go looking for them. Everyone's got them on the home screen. Every time you pick your phone up, you see it. And the minute you see it, you click on it. Yeah, and that's what social media companies love. So basically, put it somewhere obscure. By the time you've thought about going looking for it, you've got the time to go, I actually don't need to look at that. And it stops you doing it.
It does. One thing I love, like, the parallels of things. And one thing I want to talk about is like training and also like sort of marketing and the big things that move. Like obviously you've got compound movements, which are the big fuckers that really, really get you tonk, essentially. Or like they're the most bang for your buck, right? But then you've also got a load of superfluous bollocks. Like, you know, when you see someone doing that on like one of those balls with like a kettlebell hanging off their schlong or something like that. Maybe not. I've never actually seen that.
Never seen that one.
That's what
Mine's not big enough. I've not got a small enough kettlebell, to be honest.
But you know what I mean? It's like, I see it all the time in the gym. Where it's like, yeah. But then you just do a fucking like deadlift and that actually moves and gets everything working. What would you say in terms of brand building is like the deadlift or the squat? Like what's the big thing that have really moved the needle? And then what is the superfluous, kind of band, that one, whatever that is, that I think a lot of people, it looks really sexy.
The nice to haves.
The nice to have, or not even the nice to haves, but sometimes like they look really sexy, but they don't actually work, you know?
Okay, so I think...
Start with the compounders.
I guess, yeah. So I guess the most important thing has got to be your product, brand or service. That's got to be world class. That's, that just has to be, that's got to be the most important thing in your business. That's got to be your compound movement. And I think then very, very closely followed by, obviously, most businesses start off with, one or two founders potentially. I think then the next thing is, again, you believing in your journey, finding other people who are mad enough to believe in your journey as well. So the team that you put around you just makes or breaks you. So I think incredible product, incredible team, you can get through a lot with that. You can make a lot of mistakes if you have those two things.
Yep.
Is this answering the question the way that you
I'm just thinking about like what I'm going to do with my team now. I've got a team, it's like, because I'll go to fucking war with for these guys.
Yeah, so that's important. So most importantly, and I think because we could digress on this, but don't employ friends. Employing your mates, very rarely do they turn into competent professionals. But if you employ competent professionals, you become really good mates.
Sure.
So, in terms of hiring people, but it's great because I did the same. I'd go to war for anyone on my team. And I think that's really important. And I think they would for me too, I hope. So I think that's really important because, this is a marathon, not a sprint. I think those have got to be the two biggest game-changing factors. There's tons and tons of other stuff, obviously. You've got to work unbelievably hard.
What's your side raise, or like the one that's not as obvious but it's still pretty decent?
I mean, at the moment, I can still only think of stuff that's critically important.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, all this is linked through consistency. You see, again, you could say, I think the anomaly might be here, maybe hard work. Obviously, you have to work hard, but there's working hard and there's working smart. And I think as you get older, you get better at working smarter. You get better at managing your day to a point you can achieve more by doing less.
So talk me, because that's one of the questions I was going to ask you is like, it's not just about working hard. And like, no, as you said with your old man.
It's critically important.
You watch your old man work really hard, but didn't...
You can actually work too hard and become really ineffective.
So how have you got that dance right?
That's just something you learn as you get older, to be perfectly honest. And I think, again, as you employ more people and you realise... Remember, when you start a business, you do everything.
Yeah.
Whether you're good or bad at it. The trick is finding people who are better at these jobs than you. And actually, I had this conversation with Richard. We were hiking in France in 2018, and I used the phrase, which I actually stole from Stuart Sapkett. I used the phrase, I conduct the orchestra, but I don't run around playing all the instruments. And he said, I love that. I'm going to steal that. I've actually not seen him steal it yet, but if he does, I'm going to message him and say, yeah, you need to quote me on that. But so you do get better at that as you get older, for sure, and as you employ better people, and you can afford better people, but I don't think what you pay for people necessarily has any bearing on their ability, to be honest. And you get better at recognising what you're bad at. Now, again, when Jules and I founded the business, we were quite fortunate. We found our swim lanes quite quickly. So my thing was kind of product development and sales, and Jules did everything else. So we quite quickly found our swim lanes, and what I was good at, she was bad at, and vice versa. So that was really powerful, having that co-founder role. I'm still trying to think of stuff that's probably overrated in business, but still you still have to do. I mean, to be fair, I still think social media probably is overrated in business potentially. I think there's too many businesses that are just utterly, completely overly reliant on it, and I can see it changing so much in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting.
You have too many eggs in that basket.
Yeah, because it's really also why I find this conversation so fascinating, because I was 18 when in 2011, right? So this is all the influencer gym stuff starting, your stuff starting. And I do talk about this a lot on the podcast, but when I was leaving school, because, Wolf of Wall Street, the high status thing to do was to go into the city and get a corporate job. Being a founder for a food and drink brand or FMCG brand wasn't a thing. Mm-hmm. Now, with social media, it's like the cool thing to fucking do, but it means people are probably forgetting about. They may have an amazing Instagram feed or an amazing TikTok, but that's your superfluous exercise. But you haven't got a great product, and you haven't got your compound exercises. Then you're just kind of.
So going back to when we started Grenade, one of the reasons that we started Grenade was because I'd been a distributor of other people's products, and I'd noticed that there were a lot of good products out there that were badly marketed, and there were a lot of bad products that were brilliantly marketed. And I remember thinking, why can't you do both? Why can't you have a really good product and market it really well? The answer is marketing's really expensive, and when you've got a really good product and you're paying a premium for your product, there's generally no money left for marketing. We just kind of made it, as in the sense that we made that money by not paying ourselves anything, and we managed to. In fact, I've just thought of an answer to your previous question as what's not as important as you think. What's the side lateral raise? And that's actually burning money on marketing. I think burning money on marketing's quite overrated potentially, because
what a common way.
Well, so we built our business with very little money because we didn't have any, and I think that cash is the killer of creativity. And I think a lot of the time, if I give you a budget of £5 million, you'll go and spend £5 million, but you won't get £5 million worth of marketing. If I give you 500 quid, you'll get 500 quid's worth of marketing. See the difference? So I think that having money there, and I think that's why a lot of brands don't need investment. They think they need investment, but I think they probably don't. They need to be more creative. So I've now forgotten the question I was actually answering.
We jump around, but as in just basically superfluous exercise, like wasted exercises we waste time on, basically, which is they look really good. It's like, I don't know, I saw someone in the gym I saw someone in the gym the other day. I was like, mate, what are you doing? They had like a band around them and they were doing that as they were bench pressing.
But remember as well, and I can't think of any specific analogies then necessarily within business, because if it moves your business by 1%, a bit like that random exercise that brings your physique forward 1%, it's probably worth doing. If that 1% takes you most of the week to do it, it's not worth doing because you're missing the 99. But there comes a point where if all the other aspects of your business are working well and correct, the fine tuning,
really good point.
The fine tuning,
that's a really good point.
Having a really good lawyer, having a really good trademark lawyer, are your trademarks up to date? These are all things that.
What other little 1% things that you probably didn't think about that actually once you're ready, once you got your compounds, your squat, your bench, your deadlift down. What would you say are really?
But another 1% might be, trying to get some time off to spend time with your family and whatever. So you actually spend time away from the business, because when you're in the business, it's really hard to work on the business. So that's.
Again, asking this selfishly, because I can't rest, or I really struggle to rest, I should say. Like, great podcaster Theo Von talks about rest is work for type A fucking like ambitious people. And I thought, oh shit, like that's actually quite a good way of rest is work. Like, how have you learned to rest, or like can you do it? Because I don't think I can.
Honestly, no, I haven't. I'm not entirely sure entrepreneurs can do it. The only thing I can do is to try and, again, if I'm out running or training, I'm generally thinking about work or business, because I sort of enjoy it. I think business more than work, say, because I don't necessarily think of this as work, really. It's just something I do. I think work is something you do, not somewhere you go, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
So
that's what Michelle Roux was basically saying to me, actually.
So I think, but if I go flying, for instance, and I'm flying a helicopter or a plane or whatever, and it's there's bad weather, I'm trying to get somewhere, I'm not thinking about work. So I think you have to distract yourself, and that's why I like flying.
That's obviously like your chopper or whatever it is there. Like it looks a very wonderful piece of kit. But let's talk about flying and like what that does for you, and like also like the difference between a plane and a helicopter. Like, why did you make the switch?
So.
Because just for context, you got rid of your plane. Now
I've sold the plane. Yeah, there was a time actually I had 2 planes and a helicopter, to be fair, as you do. But you always end up having lots of aircraft or no aircraft. They're not the easiest things necessarily to buy and sell. But I was really loving the plane journey that I had a Cirrus, which was fantastic. And then I moved house fairly short notice because in a true entrepreneurial fashion, I sold my house at 3 weeks' notice. Because somebody wanted to buy it. So I just moved down to my holiday home where we are now, and then I'm moving back to the Cotswolds later this year. But I'd got a plane. I was living in Stratford upon Avon, close to Grenade HQ, and I had a plane at Gloucester, and then I've got a house in Cornwall, and I'd have like an hour's drive to the plane to then jump in the plane to fly 50 minutes to Cornwall to land at Newquay to jump in a car to have a 20-minute drive. So I love flying, but the journey didn't really make sense for a plane. And then as such now, with having multiple houses in the UK, it's quite nice to just have a helicopter at the house, jump in it, fly and land at the next house, and you cut out all the driving and all the airports in between.
What does it feel like being like a bird? Like, what's that feeling like?
I'm not one of these people, funnily enough, that's an absolutely die hard into aviation. Funnily enough, I'm interested.
Do you do it for a commonsensical reason?
Yeah, I kind of do it to get places quickly, really. And again, it's a real privilege to be able to fly something and to be able to afford to own one. But it is one of my top 5 or 6 things I like doing. But one day I'll probably stop flying and I'll just go and do something else because there's lots of things I like doing. I like boating, I like shooting, I like training and traveling and stuff. And again, you haven't got time for all of it, so they're all just parts of the parts of the journey. But I think I'll probably train for the next 30 years. I don't think I'll be flying for the next 30 years.
Wow, yeah. I also like that again. I think how we were talking about reinventing the business or disrupting is the exact word you used out. But like you can disrupt yourself, and I think. I've got a mate at the minute who's struggling, and I'm like, mate, you're fucking 30. He's basically doing a job he doesn't like. He's his own business, but he doesn't like it. He's like in recruitment. I'm like, mate, you're 30. Like, you can just fucking reinvent yourself whenever. And I think people get so stuck in their own malaise or inertia,
Well, because you need time to recover. So I was 32 when I invented Grenade, but I'd been in the sports nutrition industry for sort of 20 years before that. Yeah. So I understood quite a lot about supplements, so I started the brand with with quite a high level of knowledge, and I think you should stick to what you know as well. So I knew the sports nutrition industry sort of pretty well, but as you get older, and again, the worst thing you can do is fail. You're not dead, so you'll just learn and you'll go and do something else. That's great when you're young because you've got time to recover. Would I say to people to take risks, in their teens and 20s and 30s? Absolutely. Manage the downside, obviously. Would I tell people to take risks in their 80s with a business? Yeah. Probably not, because you haven't got time to recover. So it's all relative, really, to where you are in the journey.
Yeah, there's a quote I love, which is by the Nike guy, Shoe Dog, which is "Business is war without bullets." I love that. I'd love to sort of know, and I think that I love strategy and I'd love to sort of go into. I love Churchill as well. I've read a lot about him and like the way he got us out of the war. Like some of his fucking quotes are just amazing. I actually read his book with every single one of his speeches from when he was a kid till he died.
I've just thought of my favourite Churchill quote, which probably isn't that well known, but he used to drink quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I think my favourite quote from him, which you probably won't read anywhere, was I think his secretary or PA. She'd said to him like, "Have you heard this one?" Said, "You're drunk."
No, yeah.
She said, "You're drunk."
Yeah.
And he said, "And you're ugly, but at least I'll be sober in the morning."
There's a historian who goes, I think another one which he drunk too much to be an alcoholic, which I thought was fucking brilliant. But yeah, he's got loads. I mean, he's like, success is moving from failure to failure without losing, not motivation, enthusiasm. Which is just genius. But so let's go into sort of the Churchill war room or the bunker room. Like, what's been the moment when you're sort of backwards against the wall? It could be competitive landscape. Like you feel like fucking almost like blitzkrieg, like everything's crashing around you, and you're trying to be cunning and you're trying to strategically get your way out of that situation because I think a lot of, I know we've talked about some, like, would love to get into what that was, that real moment when your back was against the wall and how you sort of managed to get out of it. You know, it felt like war, you know, it felt like a place.
Yeah,
of
I
war.
mean, I suppose potentially, I guess, because I learned from these situations. I never think of them as failures.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, there were times when we were doing deals, you know, that were tens or hundreds of millions of pounds, and you know, it looked like the deal had fallen apart. And I guess, you know, that specific point in time, it felt like an absolute catastrophe. But then, looking at it logically, you know, let's say if you were doing a deal for 200 million and it fell apart, well, you haven't lost anything because you didn't have the 200 million anyway. So you end up back where you were, you know, before. But that's where you learn what went wrong, and you pick yourself up from there. Some of these things, what I think you're probably alluding to, feel worse at the time, and then the next day probably don't seem so bad.
Yeah.
I can't think of a situation, you know, in business with Grenade where things were just so catastrophically, you know, bad. I guess, to be fair, around about 2013, I guess the lowest point I could think of was, again, probably we were doing the Grove Point deal, and we were getting broken into with our warehouse in Coventry, and we were being specifically targeted by people who were sort of stealing our stuff because it was so desirable. And our stuff was so desirable. I'm talking about our fat burner product, you know, that we had. You get like 1,000 of these on a pallet, and they were sort of worth £50 each. So you can imagine, you know, potentially 50 grand's worth at retail of stuff on one pallet. You know, you're not getting 50 grand if you rob a bank. So we were getting targeted for those. And they were so desirable, they were breaking into other businesses to steal the tools to break into our unit, which actually makes it a conspiracy. And we'd got, you know, that was pretty bad at the time because we thought we were going to lose the Grove Point deal, which was one thing, you know, our sort of £35 million deal. But also, you know, it felt like Jules and I versus the world. We couldn't sort of go home and relax. Bear in mind, we were exhausted anyway because we thought, you know, we got broken into 3 times in 3 weeks.
That's mental. Yeah.
So it feels incredibly personal. You know, we were sleeping in the warehouse. That would have been the lowest point, to be fair. You know, again, over probably 12 years ago now. So I've probably struggled to recall it. But yeah, coming back, that was kind of pretty bad. Not because the deal fell apart or could have fallen apart, but I think just because the fact you're just being targeted by people that just want something that you've worked hard for. And actually, the police at the time were brilliant. They put what's called a SIG marker on the building, I believe. Basically, it means that if our alarm goes off, they treat it like a murder. They flood the whole area with police, and the police helicopter goes up. But it became, like I said, you know, we were just being broken into repeatedly. There were unmarked cars driving up and down past our building. It's probably one for another podcast in terms of the whole story there. But luckily, through some contacts I'd got in the gym industry, I actually found out who it was.
Oh, really?
And they didn't come back, put it that way.
Really? That's mad. Let's go back into sort of the Cadbury deal, because I really want to get into the granularity of that.
Before we do, can you hold that question? Can I go for a week because I'm bursting?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Go for it, mate. Yeah.
Sorry. I've drunk like 3 litres of water. That's the problem doing it after I've trained, because you drink loads of water and then all of a sudden it's like it all comes back.
Yeah, this gym's absolutely mad.
That's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, this was the bare minimum of stuff I could get away with actually putting in. I've thought of a few more bits I'd quite like.
What else would you get?
I'm being really specific now, but I'd probably have like a standing calf
Joe
raise.
Rogan talks about a lot, isn't it? I don't know if you listen, but is that the thing?
The inversion table.
Yeah,
Flip upside down, yeah.
And that basically just stretched out everything.
Yeah, bro, I've been doing that for years. They're brilliant.
Really? That's what you and Storm need, mate. Yeah.
They're really good. They're really... Do you know what, as well? They're probably about 300 or 400 quid. It'd be the best few hundred quid you'd spend.
Really?
Really good. You need some space for it, but it's really effective.
What, and you basically just whack yourself in and then...
Yeah, 10 minutes a week. It's... it's as good as... I go to a chiropractor as well.
Yeah.
But honestly, those over the years are brilliant.
Really interesting.
Right, question.
Cadbury's. Yeah, so
Yes.
Take me to the apex of that deal. Like, how do these massive exit deals work? And like, when they keep you on board, how does your role change?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that they do when, depending on the deal, but when someone invests to that level of magnitude, they want to make sure you're going to stay around for a few
And
years.
how much do they invest? If you're allowed to say.
Well, so I mean, that with Cadbury, they bought Grenade for 200 million.
Yeah.
But then you get like what's called an earn out generally, and it just means then that you get paid an evaluation, but then if all these deals are different, but in our case, if you hit numbers over the next X amount of years, there's another bite of the cherry potentially, 3 years or whenever it may be, based on X amount of valuation if you're delivering X amount of a return. I mean, all these founder deals are different. I mean, looking at, say, for instance, Palmer Luckey, who invented Oculus and sold it to Facebook, I think he got sacked out of his earn-out. So you then, I guess the biggest change, you go from being a founder and owner of a business to potentially being an employee.
Yeah.
Is the biggest change, which most founders
But then you've got
don't
enough
like.
dough in the bank, so it's kind of cool, or is
Yeah,
it?
yeah, but it does. But again, you probably feel like you've sold your kids.
Really?
So I don't know if you've got children, but I don't. But if you sell your business, it is very much, I'd imagine, like sort of parting with a child. It's something that you've invented and grown up to love and worked on and developed, and then 1 minute it's yours, the next minute it's not. So yes, you get money in the bank, but you can feel like you've lost an arm. So I've done, a lot of deals with Grenade, so I think I'm probably fairly versed in, how you feel, but it's really easy to feel quite flat when you've, done a deal for millions of pounds, because millions of pounds don't replace what, the love you have for your business or your brand, because brands are extensions of their founders. So
it's interesting. I interviewed the Riverford founder, and he said, "Don't be careful not to swap your purpose for Prozac," which I thought was a really good way of putting it.
Yeah. No, that is a good one. Yeah, I know what he means by that. But I think, look, that's the thing, having a sense of purpose is critical. And I think a lot of people put the sense of purpose into their brand. And then, if you exit a business, you have to think about having a different sense of purpose. So I think for me now, because I've stepped down as CEO, but that was always a very carefully thought out, well-planned transition. And I'm in a founder role. So, Richard does a founder role at Virgin. He's not CEO of Virgin. So you can still be involved in the business and the brand, but at different levels. The difference as well being that, Richard's got kids and grandkids and I don't. So there didn't seem a lot of point in necessarily building $1 billion business and then just, one day I just die and it just goes to the government. They get enough tax. So for me, I wanted to build a legacy, in terms of not having a child, build a legacy, and then something I can be proud of that lives on after me, but also then that enables me to have the freedom and, time and money to go and do other things I enjoy, and I've mentioned some of those things. So, but yeah, sense of purpose, we could do a whole podcast on that, because that's critically important, because I know a lot of people who sell businesses, they get really bored, get really fed up, get really lonely, and they end up just doing it again.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to build a sports nutrition business again. I don't think I would, in terms of, but for the wrong reasons potentially.
Yeah.
And then so what? Because again, all the time you're doing that, you're not doing something else.
So with the Mondelez deal specifically, what were they asking? We said at the beginning there was all this due diligence. Like, how did that deal? Because I think everyone wants to get to the El Dorado, the exit El Dorado, right? A lot of people listen to this.
Most people just won't get there. I can tell you that now.
Yeah, but you have got there. You have got there. But talk me through what they're looking for. Like, how did you get that deal over the line?
Well, so for instance, trademark wise, so they're looking. Mondelez bought Grenade. They're a global business. They want to be able to sell it globally. Have you got it trademarked all around the world?
Yes.
We did. Vast majority of businesses wouldn't have that. So rather than paying ourselves salaries, we were buying trademarks.
Yeah.
That's one of those. Now, again, is that one of your things that's a 1% nice to have? Because it takes more than 1%. If you don't own the trademark in America,
well, it's
worthless.
The path to exit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and
what else is on that you think on the way to get you to the path?
In terms of sort of trademarks and design marks,
or just how these fucking brands are going to actually get get this big exit? Because a lot of people listening to this are wanting to do what you've done. And as you say, I agree, like a lot of them won't get there, but like I still think we should give people hope of that they can.
Oh yeah, I'm not being defeatist with that. I just think, again, if we go back, and I feel like I'm repeating myself, but if we go back and say, right, you've got to have a world-class product, brand or service, you've got to have an incredible team, you've got to be making money, you've got to have a business that's scalable, potentially in our case, you want someone big to come in and buy you, big in what respect? If you're a UK business, do you just sell to another UK business? What about Europe and the rest of the world? We wanted to do something that we could sell all over the world and be scaled all over the world. So, if you want to sell it all over the world, you've got to have products that are compliant all around the world. So you could spend, a decade on different formulas. Do you own the supply chain? Do you own the tooling, the molding? Do you own all the IP to the point that no one can come in and just copy it? We'd got trademarks on formula, name, and the bottle that it came in. For instance, it just goes on and on and on. It's just like just a completely, exhaustive list. Having it trademarked around the world, like I said, we've got over 200 trademarks and design marks. Just because.
What countries are you in right now?
We're in about 80 countries. Probably be easy to say where we're not.
Really? Fucking hell. So what's some of the big markets outside the UK?
We're going back into the US, but Canada, Western Europe. We've just launched in Australia. We're in.
What's been the hardest country to launch in?
I'd say America's probably the hardest because it's the most competitive, and I think we think that we speak a common language, but we don't. It's just night and day.
I always say it's like
And a lot of states in America, you really don't want to sell in.
Yeah.
So if you could just pick.
America's not New York and LA.
No, if you could just pick the top 10 states, you probably wouldn't bother with the rest. But as it is, then you've got to sort of sell in all of them. And again, anytime you sell in California, you're going to get sued.
Really?
So I won't even go into it. It's a whole different. It'll take me too long to explain. But most of the 90% of lawsuits come out of California.
Really?
So it's just a very, very litigious state.
Yeah.
But these are all the things that it goes. But there were probably some fairly low points in terms of various lawsuits. Most because people just sue you for no reason, and you have to defend it. We had someone who bought one of our products once, or says he bought one of our products. There was no proof. He never had to prove buying the product at all, but says he bought one of our products from GNC, and says it made him really ill. And he also said that. So it said it made him really ill, and he was paranoid, and he was getting headaches and felt sick and whatever. He was a registered drug addict, but basically then he just said it was our fault, and we had to settle out of court for that. And it's just like you just think, really, but that's welcome to America.
Yeah.
So that food products are incredibly difficult because it's stuff that people put in their body. So. Making and selling something people ingest is kind of is difficult. It's not like, say, selling clothing. No one probably sues you for clothing, saying your clothes made them ill. We know as well it's just not true. But that's just America.
Yeah. What's one truth you believe that most people would disagree with you on?
Oh, I'll have to think about that one. I haven't got a ready-made answer for that.
Here's what I made earlier. Get like an M&S ready meal stuck in. No, it's interesting because I think like one thing I've been picking up from you is this ability just to have this common sense. It's like a theme that I've picked up. I always pick up like kind of one theme.
Okay, yeah.
But it's just this like common sense, but what kind of added with that is this wild ambition. Because I think people think of wild ambition as like, it's this big, like they've got this crazy vision. It's like, that is one part of it, but the other part of it is like, well, just ask a commonsensical question, which is, why hasn't chocolate been disrupted? Why?
Yeah, people have done it with drinks. If I think of like Fever Tree and like tonics and stuff, I think the drinks market's been a lot more disruptive. But I think as well with confectionery, it's got such a good foothold, again, hundreds of years in the UK, for instance, like, with Cadbury, in every location you can think of. It's a difficult industry to disrupt, hitting it head on. So I call it the little bighorn. You have to.
Horn, as in?
The little bighorn. Well, you don't attack people where they're strongest, you attack them where they're weakest. And generally, if you have to be something that they're not, So, in our case, like I said, we went high protein because everyone else was low protein and we were low sugar and they were high sugar. So we just attacked them, where we were strongest in that respect. But yeah, and I think as well, they're all owned by enormous companies who've got deep pockets and money to burn. I think then probably the question you just asked me about, what's the truth? How did you phrase it? The truth I believe.
One truth you believe most people disagree with you on. I ask it to a lot of guests.
Yeah, so I don't think you need then. You don't need a lot of money to build a disruptive business. It doesn't have to be expensive, it just has to be disruptive. So the point that I think that people think that, let's say, if you were going to attack a big food company head on, you need more money than them. Well, and that's where they look for investment. Well, you're not going to outspend a company that's worth hundreds of billions. You just have to do something better than they do. And I think that's where potentially, we were very good at hyper-targeting and hyper-focusing. My favourite, again, we focused on protein bars, but my favourite example actually is how Under Armour became a significant competitor to Nike because they hyper-focused on compression.
How did they do that?
They took a category of compression, which
Compression
Nike,
as in t-shirt, the material.
Just as in compression, as in if with American football, where they were wearing like compression clothing, so it was helping and aiding in terms of blood flow. It was such a niche part of clothing that Nike obviously were aware of it, and it wasn't worth them investing in because it wasn't big enough. The lemon wasn't worth the squeeze, so they say. So I think Under Armour became experts at compression. And then they absolutely owned it. Like the really sort of tight stuff that American footballers are wearing. And before you know it, then they've got a deal in American football because they make the best compression stuff because no one else made it. But it's a bit like some protein bars. If you were a Ferrero or a Cadbury and you're looking at protein bars and you're selling hundreds of billions in chocolate, why would you bother with protein bars? It's just a distraction.
What I'm saying. The way you say this, mate, is so fucking simple and commonsensical.
In order to become a big business and have the authenticity and authority to be able to play in different categories, you've got to be really good at something. You have to own something. And we own protein bars.
How did you? Yeah, sorry, go on.
Well, I think a lot of brands, they don't actually own something. And I'm actually using an analogy I mentioned earlier when I was saying about my rules for investing. And I said, I'll say another brand that I've invested in that tick all these boxes. And I didn't mention the brand. And it's actually ThruDark, the clothing company, the military clothing company, because it's great product, great founders. I was buying it. I love the mission, sense of purpose, doesn't need too much time. And I think, and again, they can really own that performance outdoor clothing. And I said the same question actually to their founders, Stas and Louis. I said, if you could own one thing, what would it be? And actually, one of the answers I got was quite interesting because they mentioned summit suits.
Suits
for Everest. So
so
Stas is doing a world record attempt 15th of May, I believe. So when this goes out, he may have already done it, but they're doing a world record attempt to do London to Everest, back to London in 7 days.
Wait, say that again. London
to Everest, climbing Everest, back down, back to London within 7 days.
That's wild.
So logistics. So they've been acclimatising in an oxygen tent because obviously it's normally you have time to acclimatise on the mountain. There isn't time to do that. So they've got there's like a speed ascent. But a summit suit is what you'll wear to go to the top of Everest. So if you can make an incredible summit suit, imagine what they'll learn, which they have, 5th generation one, I think now. But imagine what they've learned in terms of that outer performance clothing to keep you alive at 30,000 feet. They're not going to sell many summit suits, obviously. If they sold probably 10 a year, they've done well. So it doesn't build a big business, but it tells people you're fucking good at what you do because...
Yeah, it's a brand status almost.
Well, as they've said, it's a bit like working in cars in Formula One. If you win on Sunday, you sell on Monday. So
wait, I don't understand what that means.
So if you win a race on Sunday, you'll sell more cars on Monday. So if Ferrari do well in Grand Prix, they sell cars the following day. Yeah. Because again, people don't run out and buy Formula One cars. It tells people you're good at what you do. and people like that overkill and that comfort. You know, I like 4x4s. Some of them are take off road, but Land Rover are extremely good at making competent 4x4s. 99.9% of the people take the kids to school with them and just don't take them off road, but people like that, you know, being good at something. And
what was your...
Sorry, 1 second. See, if we can then, you know, dominate and show expertise in a particular category, like we've done, like say Through Dark will do with their summit suits, you can then take what you learn from that very, very niche item of clothing in their case, put it into other clothing then that's more mass market that people do appreciate. Because people quite like the fact that, you know, if they're going hiking up Snowdon, for instance, what they're wearing is, you know, is genetically related to something which one of the founders climbed Everest in. So I think, you know, these are all part of the stories that are parts of brands and part of founders' journeys. That, you know, never underestimate that founder journey and how important that story is to consumers. And you know, as Through Dark say, you know, not just clothes that they stand by, but you know, they actually stand in. So it's anything they make, they use themselves, and it's just a really important part of the journey. But sorry, you were saying?
No, I'm just thinking about it. It's almost like the halo effect of. This is again something I've sort of spoken to not to Paul Ainsworth about, but in terms of restaurants, is it's like he's got number 6, you know, the Michelin, the one, you know,
in Padstow,
oyster foam that you'd never go to,
champagne froth. No idea if they do that. I can't do froth in food. It's not food. I mean, I'm sure it's technically very clever, but it's completely wasted on someone like me.
But as it's almost that's his summit suit, isn't it? And it's like that's their creme de la creme. It's like the high end restaurant.
I get that.
But then their other range is the Mariners. The Cafe Rahano where we ate yesterday, and it's like the brand halo effect and storytelling, which is the summit suit. One thing I was going to ask you about is what kind of your halo effect or summit suit was when Fulfill, Barbells, and other competitors came in, because like you guys were first, and a lot of people have talked about this, and like to me as friends, it's like, oh, we were first, and then suddenly the competitors come in, and how did you not get brand insecure, you know?
But because, you know, we're us and they're them. So I don't know what, you know, I don't know what I'm doing. I do know what I'm doing tomorrow. But let's say, you know, as a brand, if I don't know what my next move is, no one else is going to work out my next move. And I think, you know...
Wait, say that again. That's bloody good. Wait, so if you don't know your next move...
Yes, if I don't know what my next move is as a brand owner, no one else is going to work it out because I don't know where I'm going. So, you know, I have no strategy. I make it up as I go along, as you can tell. But... in terms of, like I said, I think the competition's a fantastic thing, but I think as well, a lot of other people in this space, if you took any of their marketing or any of their branding and you mixed it all up amongst themselves, they could all be one and the same. Whereas I think if you see a tank driving over Sydney Harbour Bridge, you know, and me on board or, you know, or whatever, then you'll know it's Grenade. So I think, you know, we floated a Grenade hot air balloon past Glastonbury. And again, if you think, you know, look at the stuff that Brewdog have done. I mean, it's just a masterclass in marketing, you know, really being creative, thinking on their feet, doing stuff that, you know, probably only they could think of, like we do stuff only we can think of. They can't they can't stop other people making beer, nor would they want to. I can't stop other people making protein bars, nor do I want to. But we'll know that anything that we do is just very, you know, Grenade. As we always said, we do it our way or not at all. And I think...
What is your way? Like, how do you forge that? Because...
Driving a tank across Sydney Harbour Bridge that's got no relevance whatsoever to selling protein bars, but it's just a good fun thing to do.
Yeah.
Anything that's just completely irrelevant. I mean, we've got something coming up called Sky Climb, and we've got Sam Sheriff, who's an ex-Royal Marine, and he's doing the world's highest rope climb. So it's going to be 10,000 feet in the air. He's climbing a 100-foot rope. He's going to do it suspended from our Grenade hot air balloon, and we're going to fly around in my helicopter doing the filming because it's too high for a drone. That's got no.
So he's going to be. It's off
10,000 feet in the air, 100-foot rope. He's going to climb out the balloon, climb the 100-foot rope.
Has he got a
He's got a parachute on because he's got a parachute off at the end.
That's so mad.
But it's got no but look at Red Bull, when they do these mad Red Bull stunts, it's got no relevance really whatsoever to an energy drink. Just some of this stuff is just fun to do. It's good branding. And again, we always said we wanted to be the Red Bull of sports nutrition. So, but with us, I think with Red Bull, a lot of their stuff is very much, they never do anything that involves animals or fighting sports. So you'll never see them on boxing or MMA
What about
or
animals?
horse race. Whenever you ever seen Red Bull in horse racing?
What would you guys do with animals?
Yeah, nothing. But I'm just saying, Red Bull, that's their brand.
Okay,
That's their brand value. Is they just don't do that. Monster are all about doing fighting sports. So again, you'll see Monster at Red MMA, but you don't see Red Bull in MMA. See what I mean about attacking competition where they're weaker or where they're stronger?
Yeah.
Don't hit Red Bull in Formula One.
Yeah.
Why would you hit Red Bull in Formula One?
Yeah.
They're really good at it.
Yes.
It's like just picking the kid at school who's 3 feet taller than you and massive and going and picking a fight. You're not going to win.
Don't aim for their heart, aim for their ankles.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Yeah.
So as ankle biters, as we were called once by
really?
another confectionery brand.
Yeah.
So I forgot where I was going with this now. We've got a Sky Climb coming up, but so with Red Bull, they know their brand parameters, what they do and don't do. I know what my brand parameters would be, and things again I don't want to do. Like again, we don't really do anything with fighting sports or anything either, just because I'm not really interested in boxing. So it doesn't feel like. Whereas I do more stuff with the military because I like military stuff. We'll call grenade. So
yeah, what pulled you to the military stuff?
We probably haven't got time to go into it now.
What are we on?
I've just always been interested in the military.
What are we on for time, by the way? I haven't even looked.
I've got 12 minutes.
Okay.
But so I was saying about we've digressed now. We were saying about
I think we'll begin to wrap this up. But the point about picking your strengths and their weaknesses, and going for their weaknesses, not their strengths. Is just so valuable, and I think
it feels obvious to me, but I'm not sure it's obvious to probably.
Well, it's not. This is what I'm saying. As I said to you, what I've got from you is just your common sense plus massive ambition, and it's something I've never spoken. But as I said, you get something from each guest, right? And it's just, but with you, mate, it's like this common sense, but then it's so obvious that it's almost so obvious it's unobvious. If that's the right way of saying it?
I think so.
Yeah.
But no, I think we were just saying about some of the stunts that we do, and I think people will see some of our stunts and they'll know it's us. But I think the point I was going to make was that I think a lot of what Red Bull do, that it's incredible stunts. Yes, there's a real human element in that, like Felix Baumgartner jumping from space, but I think they've got a lot of technology as well that probably help them again with regard to Formula One, and again if they're doing stuff with stunt planes, obviously there's huge amounts of human skill in these things. But I think for us as well, anything where there's real human endurance, where the human, the individual is doing a lot of the work, like Stas running up Everest, or Sam doing Sky Climb, something where nutrition can play a really important part. That's not obvious, just like football. Grenade should be there. So I think, and a lot of it just comes down to, I think, as I said about brands being extensions of their founders. I'm not interested in Formula One. So I'm not interested in football or rugby or cricket. So there were never obvious places for me to go and put my brand, because I don't really find it that interesting, to be fair. And again,
how do you find your competitors' weaknesses? Because I think, again, that's something that probably comes naturally to you, but I think a lot of people will be looking at competitors, which happens.
Yeah.
And that's how you get the blandemic happens, where every brand looks the same. And it's a cool brand.
I think maybe that's the weakness, if they just look the same. Again, if I look at something, I think we could make a better one. Or again, if they're very, very entrenched in, say, football, for instance, or MMA or something that, that we're less interested in. I mean, don't get me wrong. We now Grenade's at the stage where, it's a product that, any sport, it's appropriate for, but that wasn't where we started. We started with bodybuilding essentially, and the military. You mentioned Jamie Alderton, but if you're not careful as a brand, you can really get pigeonholed somewhere. And I know certain brands that were just pigeonholed in rugby, or golf or football, and they just couldn't break out of them. And the problem with some of these sports as well, there's just not enough people that do it sometimes. So you end up alienating an entire category of people because, and we very nearly did it ourselves. We focused on the military because I was interested in it. I've got friends in the military, and no one was making product for soldiers. Why not? Soldiers, again, train hard. They put their lives on the line. It's a very physical job. Why is a soldier less important than a footballer? Just because people like football.
How did you get out of that niche, though? Break out of the niche?
Well, you just don't get pigeonholed somewhere for too long, because if you're not careful, you can just get stuck somewhere, and then the brand can never be associated with anything else. And we wanted our brand to be associated with anyone really who was into training and looking after themselves.
What were some of the moves because on the other side of that, you haven't lost your brand soul because you just drove a tank over Sydney Bridge.
Yes, you've got to keep the DNA.
But then what were some of the we'll finish literally after this, just quickly, like what were some of the things you did to get out of that pond of military? Because I think there's a load.
Well, so we like taking tanks into shows, and I still do. And I think two things were happening actually. The military stuff tends to be quite green and quite black. There tends to be quite military colours. And Through Dark, I've got this at the moment where the stuff they make again is generally, although I'm wearing a white top, is generally quite dark colours. So, but as we were going into retail, dark colours don't look good on retailer shelves. So we needed to think, and this is why we did the bar as well, we need to think of a way that we could, if we were an ice cream brand, we'd be Ben and Jerry's. We wouldn't be Haagen-Dazs or Walls. So more creative, more playful. And again, we wanted to think about how we could get cheaper products onto more shelves. I say cheaper as in more people could afford, £2.50, not £60, but also how we could have brighter colours, how we could incorporate that. And that's really difficult when you're associated with the military, because the military don't wear bright colours and we're called Grenade. So that was something we had to solve. But also, I'd got people coming up to me at shows and saying, I really love your products. I wish I could use them. And I'd say, well, why can't you use them? And they'd say, because I'm not in the military. And it was like, shit, okay. So we were doing a lot with the military, but then it was a fairly carefully thought out plan of over the years how we not soften the brand, but how we start to incorporate more colour. So our team, and specifically a guy called Alex Dickens, who's our head of brand at Grenade and was our graphic designer at the time, every iteration of label that he'd done just incorporated more colour, changing the fonts, less clutter, less about the science and sports nutrition, more about the benefit. A brand is never finished, as Mark Zuckerberg would say about Facebook. So, Grenade will never be finished. You have to keep on evolving the brand, keeping it relevant, keeping the DNA, which is again why I'm still involved. You have to do all this slowly but with pace, if that makes sense. So you've got to keep doing it over time, and stay true to the brand. So then we started doing more food shows. The bars came in, more colour. With the bars came more colour. More colour meant more retail, and we could just slowly, obviously we do still just as much of the military as we ever did, but we've gained everyone else as well. Keep disrupting.
Mate, let's wrap that up. Absolute joy. I've loved
97 hours later.
Yeah, sorry, that was absolutely